The crystal champagne glass shattered against marble, echoing through the bistro like a gunshot. Adrian Cole, Manhattan's most ruthless billionaire, stood frozen as the shy waitress with haunted eyes stared him down, her voice barely above a whisper but cutting deeper than any boardroom attack he'd ever faced. "I'm not for sale." His $1,000 offer to buy a fake wife for the night lay crumpled on the table between them, and for the first time in his carefully controlled life, Adrian Cole had no idea what to do next. This is the story of how one desperate proposal shattered two broken hearts wide open, and how the man who tried to purchase love ended up finding something he never knew he needed. If you want to see how this impossible night changes everything, stay with me until the end. And drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The rain hit Manhattan like it had a personal vendetta. Adrian Cole stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, watching the storm turn the city into a blur of lights and chaos 43 stories below. His reflection stared back at him, sharp suit, sharper jaw, and eyes that hadn't softened in 3 years. Not since the engagement photos had hit the tabloids with the headline, "Billionaire Bachelor Betrayed. Vanessa Winters Caught in Scandal." His phone buzzed for the 14th time in an hour. He didn't need to look to know it was his mother. "Mr. Cole?" His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Your mother is calling again. She says if you don't answer, she'll—" "I know what she'll do, Jessica." Adrian turned from the window, running a hand through dark hair that probably cost more to maintain than most people's mortgages. "Tell her I'm in a meeting." "Sir, you've been in a meeting for 2 weeks." Then I'm very dedicated to this meeting." Jessica's sigh was audible even through the speaker. "She also wanted to remind you about tonight's gala, and she's already texted you 3 potential dates, with full dossiers." Adrian's jaw tightened. Of course she had. Patricia Cole didn't do anything halfway, especially when it came to her son's love life, or lack thereof. Ever since Vanessa had imploded his engagement in the most public way possible, his mother had made it her personal mission to find him a replacement. Never mind that Adrian had exactly zero interest in opening that particular door again. "Jessica, clear my schedule for the next hour. I need to—" He paused, glancing at his watch. 6:47 p.m. The gala started at 8. "Actually, I'll be leaving early." "Early? Sir, you have the Chen Industries presentation at—" "Reschedule it." Adrian was already grabbing his jacket, his mind racing through scenarios, each one worse than the last. His mother would be at the gala with her parade of eligible socialites. The investors would be watching, vultures circling for any sign of weakness. And somewhere in that crowd would be Vanessa herself, probably with her new tech bro boyfriend, ready to remind everyone that she'd walked away from Adrian Cole unscathed. The rain was coming down harder now, turning the streets into rivers. Adrian's driver navigated the BMW through traffic, with the kind of precision that came from being paid obscene amounts of money to be invisible and efficient. "Where to, Mr. Cole?" "Just drive." Adrian pulled out his phone, scrolling through his mother's texts without actually reading them. Each one came with an attached photo, beautiful women with perfect smiles and perfectly curated lives. Women who would say the right things, wear the right clothes, and ultimately want the wrong life. His son's face flashed across his mind. 7-year-old Ethan with his gap-toothed grin and collection of dinosaur facts that he deployed at the most inappropriate moments. The kid who'd asked him just last week, "Dad, why does Grandma keep bringing ladies to dinner? Are you shopping for a new mom?" The memory made Adrian's chest tight. He tried to explain that Grandma just wanted him to be happy, but Ethan had looked at him with those 2 knowing eyes and said, "You don't look happy when they're here. You look like you do at work." Smart kid. Too smart, maybe? The car slowed, and Adrian glanced up to see they'd stopped outside a small Italian bistro tucked between a bookstore and a dry cleaner, the kind of place he'd normally never notice, let alone enter. But the warm light spilling onto the rain-soaked sidewalk looked almost inviting, and his mother's texts were still coming in rapid-fire succession. "I'll be 10 minutes, he told his driver, already stepping out into the storm. The bistro was nearly empty, just an elderly couple in the corner and a woman reading at the bar. The smell of espresso and fresh bread hit him immediately, so different from the sterile air of boardrooms and country clubs that he almost turned around. "Sit anywhere you'd like." The voice was soft, almost hesitant. Adrian turned to see her, A waitress with dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, wearing a white button-down and black slacks that had seen better days. But it was her eyes that stopped him. Large, luminous, and carrying the kind of quiet sadness that spoke of stories she'd never tell. She wasn't looking at him with recognition, which was refreshing. Most people in Manhattan knew his face from magazines or business news. This woman just looked tired and patient, like she'd served 1,000 customers and expected nothing from any of them. "Just coffee," Adrian said, sliding into a booth by the window. "Black." "Coming right up." She moved with an economy of motion, no wasted energy, no false enthusiasm, just quiet competence. His phone buzzed again. Another text from his mother, this time with a photo of Charlotte Vanderberg. Old money, perfect pedigree, and according to the attached bio, very interested in meeting you tonight. Adrian felt something snap inside him, not dramatically, not violently, just snap, like a rubber band stretched too far for too long. When the waitress returned with his coffee, he looked up at her and heard himself say, "How would you like to make $1,000 tonight?" She set the cup down carefully, her expression unchanged. "Excuse me? Tonight, there's a gala. I need someone to pretend to be my wife for a few hours." The words came out clinical, businesslike, the same tone he'd used to negotiate a merger. "It's a simple job. Smile, make small talk, leave early. $1,000, cash." For a long moment, she just stared at him. Then something shifted in her face, not anger exactly, but something colder, more disappointed. "Are you serious right now?" "Completely. Look, I know it sounds. You don't know anything." Her voice was still soft, but there was steel underneath now. "You walk in here, sit down for 5 minutes, and decide I'm the kind of person you can just purchase for the evening?" Adrian felt his face flush, which almost never happened. "That's not what I... What did you think?" She leaned forward slightly, and he could see her hands were shaking, not from fear, from something else. Anger, maybe, or recognition of something she'd seen before. "That I'd be grateful? That $1,000 would make me forget I have dignity? That I'm so desperate I'd jump at the chance to play dress up in your world?" I didn't mean it like that. But even as he said it, Adrian knew that was exactly how he'd meant it. He'd seen an easy solution to his problem and assumed money could fix it, the same way he fixed everything. "You know what the sad part is?" She picked up his untouched coffee, her voice dropping even lower. "You probably think you're being generous. I was offering you an opportunity. You were offering me an insult." She set the cup down on the table between them with a soft click. "The coffee's $3. You can leave the money on the table." Adrian opened his mouth, then closed it. His phone buzzed again. His mother, undoubtedly, with another candidate for the evening. The rain hammered against the window, and somewhere in the back of the bistro, someone was laughing. "I'm sorry," he finally said, and was surprised to find he meant it. "You're right, that was... I shouldn't have assumed." She studied him for a moment, those sad eyes searching his face for something. Whatever she was looking for, she apparently didn't find it. "No, you shouldn't have." She turned to walk away, her shoulders straight despite the obvious anger radiating from her. "Wait." Adrian didn't know why he said it, didn't know what he expected. "What's your name?" She paused, glancing back at him. "Does it matter?" It should have mattered before I opened my mouth. Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe, or recognition that he was at least capable of seeing his own mistake. "Lena. My name is Lena Hayes." "Adrian Cole." "I know who you are, Mr. Cole. Everyone knows who you are." She said it without admiration, just a statement of fact. "And now I know what kind of man you are, too." She walked away before he could respond, disappearing into the kitchen and leaving Adrian alone with his cold coffee and the crushing realization that he'd just behaved exactly like the entitled bastard he swore he'd never become. His phone buzzed again, then twice more in rapid succession. Adrian looked down at the screen to see his mother's latest salvo. Photos of 3 different women, each one more beautiful and polished than the last, each one completely wrong in ways he couldn't articulate, and underneath, a single text. "Pick one, or I'm picking for you. You're not spending another event alone, Adrian. Ethan deserves to see his father happy." "Mother." He stared at the message, then at the kitchen door where Lena had disappeared, then back at his phone. Slowly, deliberately, he pulled out his wallet and laid a $100 bill on the table next to the $3 coffee. It wasn't an apology. Nothing could make up for what he'd just done. But it was something. An acknowledgement that he'd screwed up, that she deserved better, that maybe, just maybe, he was capable of recognizing his own arrogance when it slapped him in the face. Adrian walked out into the rain without looking back. The gala was exactly as terrible as he'd anticipated. The Plaza Ballroom glittered with Manhattan's elite, all of them dressed in clothes that cost more than most people made in a month. Chamber music played softly in the background while waiters circulated with champagne and canapes that had been designed more for Instagram than actual consumption. Adrian stood near the bar, nursing a scotch and trying to look interested in a conversation about cryptocurrency with two hedge fund managers whose names he'd already forgotten. "Adrian!" His mother's voice cut through the ambient noise like a diamond-tipped drill. Patricia Cole appeared at his elbow in a silver gown that probably cost more than a decent used car, her smile sharp and satisfied. "There you are. Come, there's someone I want you to meet." "Mother, I'm in the middle of nonsense. Robert and David understand." She was already guiding him away with a grip on his elbow that looked gentle but felt like steel. "Charlotte is here. You remember Charlotte Vanderberg? Her father owns half of Brooklyn, I know." Adrian tried to dig in his heels, but his mother had the momentum of a small tank. "Mother, I really don't think—" "Charlotte, there you are." Charlotte Vanderberg was exactly as advertised. Blonde, poised, with a smile that had been perfected in finishing schools across Europe. She extended a hand like she was offering him a prize. "Adrian, what a pleasure. Your mother has told me so much about you." "I'm sure she has." Adrian shook her hand briefly, trying not to wince at her perfume, something floral and expensive that immediately gave him a headache. "Charlotte, nice to meet you. Your mother mentioned you're in tech acquisition. That must be fascinating." It absolutely wasn't, and he could tell from her eyes that she didn't actually care. This was theater, a dance they were both supposed to perform for his mother's benefit. "It has its moments," he said vaguely, already looking for an exit. "Charlotte just returned from Paris," his mother interjected, her tone suggesting this was information of critical importance. "And she's very involved in the arts. You should see her gallery in Soho." "I'd love to, but I actually have an early meeting." "Adrian." His mother's voice dropped to a warning tone. "Don't be rude." He was saved from responding by the arrival of Martin Chen, one of his key investors, and more importantly, someone his mother couldn't dismiss. "Adrian, there you are. I need to discuss the Singapore timeline with you. It's urgent." Martin grabbed his arm with the enthusiasm of a man who'd had 3 glasses of champagne too many. "Sorry, Patricia, Charlotte. Business, you know how it is." His mother's smile went rigid, but she couldn't object without looking petty. "Of course, Adrian will talk more later." It wasn't a suggestion. Martin steered him toward a quieter corner of the ballroom, and Adrian felt a rush of genuine gratitude. "Thank you. You have no idea how much I needed that escape." "Your mother is terrifying," Martin said cheerfully. "Brilliant woman, but terrifying. Now, about Singapore, we actually do need to talk. The timeline's getting compressed, and there are some regulatory concerns." Adrian forced himself to focus as Martin launched into the details, but part of his mind was still back in that bistro, watching Lena Hayes look at him with disappointment in her eyes. That quiet condemnation had stung more than any of Vanessa's public betrayals, and he wasn't entirely sure why. "Which is why we need your sign-off by Monday at the latest," Martin was saying. "Adrian, you with me?" "Yeah, sorry, Monday. I'll have Jessica send over the revised contracts." "Everything okay? You seem distracted." Adrian glanced across the ballroom and spotted Vanessa holding court near the champagne fountain, her red dress designed to turn heads, and apparently succeeding. She caught his eye and smiled, not warmly, but with the kind of satisfaction that said she knew exactly how much this whole evening was costing him. "Just tired," he lied. "Long week." "Tell me about it." "Hey, is that your son's nanny over there? The one you brought to the investor dinner last month?" Adrian followed Martin's gaze and felt his stomach drop. His mother was making a beeline toward a young woman in a blue dress, definitely not Ethan's nanny, but clearly another one of her carefully selected candidates. I need some air, Adrian muttered, already moving toward the terrace doors. Adrian, wait! But he was already gone, pushing through the crowd with the single-minded determination of a man drowning and spotting the surface. The terrace was blessedly empty, the rain having stopped but leaving the air cool and clean. Adrian gripped the railing and stared out at Central Park, the trees dark shapes against the glowing city. His phone buzzed. He pulled it out, expecting another maternal ambush, but instead found a text from Ethan's nanny. Ethan asked why you're at a party without him, told him you were working. He said you're always working, just FYI. Maria Adrian closed his eyes. 7 years old and already seen through the excuses. Already learning that work was where his father hid when life got complicated. Dramatic exit, Cole. Very on brand. He didn't need to turn around to recognize Vanessa's voice, honeyed and sharp at the same time, like poisoned sugar. Not now, Vanessa. Oh, come on. We can't have one little conversation for old time's sake? She stepped up beside him, champagne glass in hand, her smile predatory. I saw your mother dragging you around in there, still trying to marry you off? What do you want? Nothing, just enjoying the schadenfreude of watching Manhattan's most eligible bachelor get auctioned off like a prize bull. She took a sip of champagne, her eyes glittering with malice. You know, when we were engaged, I used to think you were just focused, driven. Now I realize you're actually just scared. Adrian turned to face her fully. Is there a point to this, or are you just bored? The point is that you're never going to find what you're looking for. You're too broken for that, too cold. And the sooner you accept it, the sooner you can stop putting your mother through this circus. She gestured back toward the ballroom. Although honestly, I'm enjoying watching you suffer. It's the least you deserve after what? Adrian's voice was quiet, dangerous. After I trusted you? After I built my life around someone who was sleeping with my business partner behind my back? Vanessa's smile never wavered. You were never home, Adrian. What did you expect? I expected loyalty. I expected honesty. Apparently that was too much to ask. No, you expected a placeholder, someone who'd look good in photos and not complain when you missed dinner for the 5th night in a row. She finished her champagne and set the glass on the railing. The difference between us is that I'm honest about what I want. You're still pretending you're capable of something more. She walked away before he could respond, leaving Adrian alone with the cold air and the crushing weight of his own thoughts. She was wrong. She had to be wrong. But as he stood there, watching the city lights blur in the distance, Adrian couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, Vanessa had hit closer to the truth than he wanted to admit. He left the gala early, claiming an emergency with Ethan that wasn't exactly a lie. He needed to see his son, needed to remind himself that there was at least one relationship in his life that hadn't been poisoned by cynicism and betrayal. The penthouse was quiet when he arrived, all modern steel and glass and carefully curated art that had been selected by a decorator he'd never met. Maria looked surprised to see him, checking her watch as if to confirm it wasn't midnight yet. Mr. Cole, is everything all right? Fine. I just wanted to check on Ethan. He's been asleep for about an hour, had a good day at school, brought home another award for his science project. She smiled, the kind of genuine warmth that seemed to be missing from every other interaction Adrian had lately. He's very proud of it. Good. That's good. Adrian loosened his tie, suddenly aware of how ridiculous he must look in his tuxedo in his own home. Thank you, Maria. You can head out if you want. I'll be here for the rest of the night. She gathered her things, but paused at the door. Mr. Cole? He misses you. I know you're busy, but he talks about you constantly, wants to know what you're doing, when you'll be home, if you're okay. She hesitated, then added quietly, He's a good kid. He deserves to see more of his father. The words landed like physical blows. I know. I'm trying. I know you are. Good night, sir. After she left, Adrian poured himself a scotch he didn't want and walked to Ethan's room. The door was slightly ajar, and he could see his son sprawled across the bed in his dinosaur pajamas, a book about pterodactyls still clutched in one small hand. Adrian stood in the doorway for a long moment, just watching him breathe. This small, perfect person, who somehow still looked at him with uncomplicated love, who didn't care about quarterly earnings or investor presentations or whether his father was successfully maintaining his public image. He thought about Lena Hayes, about the disappointment in her eyes when she'd called him out for his arrogance. He thought about Vanessa's poisoned words on the terrace, about Charlotte's empty smile, about his mother's relentless campaign to fix something that maybe couldn't be fixed. And he thought about Ethan, asking his nanny why Dad was always working. Adrian finished his scotch in one swallow and made a decision that surprised even himself. Tomorrow, he'd go back to that bistro. Not with money, not with an offer, and not with the assumption that anything could be bought, just with an apology. And maybe, if he was very, very lucky, with something resembling humility. The rain started again, soft against the windows, and Adrian Cole stood in the darkness of his son's room and wondered when exactly he'd become the kind of man who thought he could solve everything with cash and contracts. Somewhere in Manhattan, Lena Hayes was probably going to bed in whatever small apartment waitresses could afford in this impossible city, thinking about the entitled billionaire who'd insulted her so casually. She'd forget about him by morning, probably, move on with her quiet life and never think about Adrian Cole again. He didn't blame her, but some stubborn part of him, the part that had built an empire from nothing, that had survived betrayal and public humiliation, that had learned to be a father when he had no idea what he was doing, refused to let it end there. Not because he needed her, but because for the first time in 3 years, someone had looked at him and seen exactly who he'd become. And instead of being impressed or intimidated or interested in his money, she'd been disappointed. That disappointment felt important somehow, like maybe it was the beginning of something, or maybe just the wake-up call he'd been avoiding. Either way, Adrian thought as he finally headed to his own empty bedroom, tomorrow morning he'd find out. And this time, he wouldn't lead with his wallet. Adrian woke up at 5:30, which was normal. What wasn't normal was lying there for 20 minutes staring at the ceiling, rehearsing an apology to a waitress he'd met once. By 6:15, he'd given up on sleep entirely and found himself in the kitchen making coffee he didn't really want, watching the sunrise paint Manhattan in shades of gold and gray. Ethan wouldn't be up for another hour. The markets wouldn't open for 3. And the bistro, assuming it even opened for breakfast, wouldn't unlock its doors until 7 at the earliest. Adrian picked up his phone 6 times to check the address, like it might have changed overnight. "This is ridiculous," he muttered to his reflection in the darkened window. "You're a grown man. Just go apologize and move on." Except he couldn't quite articulate what exactly he was apologizing for, or why it mattered so much. He'd made countless business mistakes over the years, stepped on toes, ruffled feathers, pushed too hard in negotiations. He'd learned to apologize when necessary, quick, efficient, strategic apologies that smoothed over friction and kept deals moving forward. This felt different. This felt personal in a way that made his chest tight. At 6:45, he heard Ethan's door creak open, followed by the padding of small feet. "Dad?" His son appeared in the kitchen doorway, squinting against the light, his dark hair sticking up in 3 different directions. "You're home." "Hey, buddy. Yeah, I got back early last night." Adrian crouched down, and Ethan immediately wrapped himself around his father like a small pajama-clad octopus. "Missed you." "Missed you too. Was the party boring?" "Extremely boring." "Did Grandma try to make you meet ladies again?" Adrian laughed despite himself. "How do you even know about that?" "I hear things." Ethan pulled back, his expression suddenly serious in that way 7-year-olds had when they were trying to process adult problems. "Maria says Grandma wants you to be happy, but you don't look happy when those ladies are around." "Maria's very observant." "So am I." Ethan climbed onto the counter stool, swinging his legs. "Are you sad because of Mom leaving?" The question landed like a punch. Adrian and Vanessa had never married. She'd left before they got that far. But Ethan still remembered her from when he was 4, still asked questions that Adrian never quite knew how to answer. "No, buddy, that was a long time ago. I'm not sad about that anymore." "Then why do you look sad?" "I don't look sad." "Dad, come on." Ethan gave him the same look Adrian gave junior executives when they tried to bullshit their way through presentations. "You always look sad, except when we're doing stuff together. Then you look normal." Adrian sat down heavily on the stool next to his son. "When did you get so smart?" "I was born smart. You just don't pay attention." Ethan grinned, the gap in his front teeth showing. "So what's really wrong?" How did you explain to a 7-year-old that you'd insulted a stranger and couldn't stop thinking about the disappointment in her eyes? That you'd built such high walls around yourself that everyone looked like a transaction? That somewhere along the way, you'd forgotten how to be a person instead of just a portfolio? I made a mistake yesterday, Adrian said finally. Said something I shouldn't have to someone, and now I need to go apologize. Oh. Ethan considered this. Was it a big mistake or a small mistake? Medium, I think, but it felt big. Then you should definitely apologize. Miss Henderson says apologies are important, even when they're hard, especially when they're hard. He paused. Can I have pancakes? Adrian glanced at the clock, 7:03. How about we go out for breakfast instead? Really? But you never… I know. Today's different. Adrian stood up, ruffling his son's ridiculous hair. Get dressed. Something without dinosaurs, if possible. No promises. 20 minutes later, they were in the BMW heading downtown, Ethan chattering about his science project while Adrian's stomach did complicated gymnastics. He told himself this was fine, just a normal breakfast with his kid. The fact that they were going to a specific Italian bistro in a neighborhood he'd never visited before was completely coincidental. Totally coincidental. This place looks small, Ethan observed as they pulled up to the curb. Are you sure they have pancakes? If they don't, we'll go somewhere else. Adrian helped him out of the car, his heart hammering in a way that was completely disproportionate to the situation. Come on. The bistro looked different in morning light, warmer, more worn, more real. Through the window, Adrian could see maybe a dozen people scattered among the tables, and behind the counter, pulling espresso shots with quick, efficient movements, was Lena Hayes. She hadn't seen him yet. Adrian's hand was on the door when Ethan said, Dad, you're nervous. What? No, I'm not. Your voice gets weird when you're nervous. You sound like you're giving a speech. Ethan looked up at him with those two knowing eyes. Is the person you need to apologize to in there? Maybe. Okay. Ethan grabbed his hand and pulled him forward. Let's go. It's better to get it over with quick, like pulling off a bandage. The bell chimed as they entered and several people looked up, including Lena. Adrian watched recognition flash across her face, followed quickly by something that looked like resignation. Sit anywhere, she called out, her voice professionally neutral. I'll be right with you. Adrian guided Ethan to the same booth he'd occupied the night before, trying to ignore the way his pulse was racing. Through the window, his driver sat reading a newspaper, pointedly not watching his boss make a fool of himself. She's pretty, Ethan whispered far too loudly. Is she the one? The one what? That you need to apologize to. Just sit down and look at the menu. Ethan grinned like he knew exactly what kind of trouble he was causing, and Adrian was saved from responding by Lena's approach. Up close, in better light, he could see the faint shadows under her eyes, like she hadn't slept well. Her hair was pulled back in the same simple ponytail, her white shirt crisp despite the early hour. She looked at Adrian with absolutely zero warmth. Coffee? She asked. Please, and whatever this guy wants. Adrian gestured to Ethan, who was studying her with unabashed curiosity. Do you have pancakes? Ethan asked. With chocolate chips? Something shifted in Lena's expression, not quite a smile, but a softening around the eyes. We do, and we have real maple syrup, not the fake stuff. I like you already. Well, you have good taste. She glanced at Adrian, and the warmth disappeared. Anything else? Actually, yes, He stopped, acutely aware of Ethan listening to every word. I wanted to apologize for last night. What I said was completely out of line, and you were absolutely right to call me out on it. Lena's pen paused over her notepad. Okay. I don't have an excuse. I was frustrated with my own situation and took it out on you, and that was wrong. He forced himself to meet her eyes. I'm sorry. For a long moment, she just looked at him, her expression unreadable. Then she said, Coffee and pancakes. Got it, and walked away. Ethan waited exactly 3 seconds before saying, That didn't go great, Dad. No, it didn't. Maybe she needs more time. Miss Henderson says sometimes people need time to process apologies before they can accept them. He paused. Or maybe she just thinks you're a jerk. Thanks, buddy. Very helpful. I'm just saying what I see. Ethan went back to studying the menu, completely unconcerned with his father's emotional crisis. Adrian pulled out his phone, more for something to do with his hands than any real need to check his messages. 43 emails, 12 texts, and 5 missed calls, all from people who wanted something from him. His mother had sent another message at 6:47 a.m. We need to discuss last night. You embarrassed me in front of the Vanderbergs. Call me. Mother? He put the phone face down on the table. Lena returned with his coffee and Ethan's orange juice, setting both down without making eye contact. Pancakes will be up in a few minutes. Thank you. Adrian tried to catch her eye, but she was already moving to the next table, taking orders from an elderly woman who seemed to know her by name. She's definitely mad at you, Ethan observed, sipping his juice. What exactly did you say to her? Something stupid. How stupid? Very stupid. Like told her she was bad at her job stupid? Or like made fun of her clothes stupid? Adrian winced. Neither. I offered her money to pretend to be something she's not. Ethan's eyes went wide. Dad, that's really bad. I know. Like worse than the time you forgot my parent-teacher conference. I didn't forget. I had a meeting in Tokyo. You forgot. Ethan said it matter-of-factly, without accusation, just a statement of truth. And this is worse than that. Out of the mouths of babes. Adrian was saved from having to respond by the arrival of Ethan's pancakes, a stack of 3, perfectly golden, with chocolate chips forming a smiley face and a generous side of maple syrup. Whoa, Ethan breathed. This is amazing. Lena set down the plate, and for the first time that morning, she almost smiled. Glad you approve. Anything else? This is perfect. Thank you, Ethan squinted at her name tag. Miss Lena. You're welcome. She hesitated, then looked at Adrian. He has better manners than you do. That's a pretty low bar to clear, Adrian admitted. Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe, that he'd agreed rather than defended himself. She opened her mouth like she might say something, then seemed to think better of it and walked away. She's warming up, Ethan whispered. That was almost a joke. Don't get ahead of yourself. They ate in comfortable silence, Ethan systematically demolishing his pancakes while Adrian nursed his coffee and tried not to obviously watch Lena move through the bistro. She had an easy way with the customers, nothing forced or performative, just genuine attention. The elderly woman got an extra napkin and a gentle question about her grandson. A businessman in the corner got his check without having to ask. A young mother with a fussy toddler got a warm smile and a to-go cup of coffee that definitely wasn't on the bill. She was good at this. Not in a mercenary, tips-driven way, but in a way that suggested she actually cared about the people she served, which made Adrian's offer from the night before even more insulting. I really messed up, he muttered, more to himself than to Ethan. Yep. Ethan pushed his empty plate away, maple syrup on his chin. But you can fix it. You just have to try harder. When did you become a relationship expert? I watch a lot of cartoons. They have good lessons. He grinned. Plus, Grandma talks about this stuff all the time when she thinks I'm not listening. Adrian was trying to decide if he should be concerned about that when Lena appeared with the check, setting it down with the same professional neutrality she'd maintained all morning. Thank you, Adrian said. The pancakes were great. And the coffee. He was rambling now, filling the silence with words that didn't matter. Really good. I'll pass that along to the kitchen. She started to turn away, and Adrian heard himself say, Can I talk to you? Just for a minute? Lena glanced around the bistro, still only half full, manageable without her for a moment. 1 minute? Adrian looked at Ethan, who immediately took the hint. I'm going to go look at that cool espresso machine. Don't worry, I won't touch anything. After he'd bounced off toward the counter, Lena slid into the booth across from Adrian, her posture defensive, arms crossed. I really am sorry, Adrian started. Not just sorry that you called me out, but sorry that I thought that was an appropriate thing to say to anyone. I've been living in a world where everything has a price tag for so long that I forgot some things can't be bought. Lena studied him for a long moment. That's a nice speech. It's not a speech, it's the truth. Maybe. She leaned back slightly. some of the tension leaving her shoulders. But you still thought it, that I was someone who could be bought for an evening. I thought you might need the money. Adrian stopped, recognizing how that sounded. Which is also insulting, I realize. I'm not doing well here. No, you're really not. But there was something in her voice now that wasn't quite anger anymore. Curiosity, maybe. Why did you come back? Because you were right, about all of it. And because he hesitated, not sure how to articulate something he barely understood himself. Because the way you looked at me last night was the most honest thing anyone said to me in years, and I needed to hear it. Lena's expression shifted, something complicated moving behind her eyes. Your minute's up. She started to slide out of the booth, but Adrian said quickly, Wait, please, just let me explain the full situation. Not as an excuse, just so you understand why I was desperate enough to make such a stupid offer. I don't need your life story, Mr. Cole. Adrian, please. She paused, half in and half out of the booth, clearly torn between professional courtesy and the desire to walk away from this conversation entirely. 2 minutes, she said finally, settling back into the seat. And then I have customers. Adrian took a breath, trying to organize thoughts that felt too scattered, too raw. My mother is convinced I need to remarry. She's been parading potential wives in front of me for 3 years, ever since my engagement fell apart. Every event, every dinner, every family gathering is another opportunity for her to introduce me to someone suitable. He put air quotes around the word, unable to keep the bitterness out of his voice. That sounds exhausting, Lena said, and he couldn't tell if she was being sarcastic. It is, and last night was supposed to be important. Investor gala, potential merger talks, actual business that needed my full attention. But instead, I spent the whole evening dodging my mother's matchmaking and trying not to run into my ex-fiancée who was there with her new boyfriend. He ran a hand through his hair. I wasn't thinking straight when I walked in here. I saw an easy solution to an impossible problem and grabbed at it without considering what I was actually asking you to do. Lena was quiet for a moment, her fingers tracing patterns on the table. Your ex-fiancée was Vanessa Winters. It wasn't a question. You read the tabloids. I read everything. Occupational hazard of working slow shifts. She met his eyes. She cheated on you with your business partner. That had to hurt. It did. Still does sometimes. Adrian was surprised by his own honesty. Not because I miss her, but because it made me question my own judgment. If I couldn't see what was happening right in front of me, what else am I missing? So you decided to hire a fake wife instead of telling your mother to back off. Put like that, it sounded even more pathetic. I know, trust me, I know how that sounds. But my mother doesn't back off. She's convinced that Ethan, my son, needs a mother figure and that I'm wasting my life being bitter and alone. He glanced over at the counter where Ethan was having an animated conversation with the barista about the difference between espresso and regular coffee. And maybe she's right. Maybe I am wasting my life, but that doesn't give me the right to treat other people like props in my personal drama. Lena followed his gaze to Ethan. He seems like a good kid. He is. Better than I deserve, probably. Don't do that. Adrian blinked. Don't do what? The self-deprecating thing. It's manipulative even if you don't mean it that way. Lena leaned forward slightly. You made a mistake. A big, insulting mistake. Own it, learn from it, and do better. Don't wallow in it like you're the victim of your own bad choices. The words hit harder than any business rival's attack, harder than his mother's disappointment, harder than Vanessa's betrayal. Because they were true, and because they came from someone who had absolutely nothing to gain from lying to him. You're right, Adrian said quietly. Again. I'm usually right. People just don't listen. She checked her watch. Your 2 minutes are up, Mr. Cole. Adrian? Your 2 minutes are up, Adrian. She slid out of the booth, her expression still guarded, but not quite as cold. Thank you for the apology. I accept it, but that doesn't change what happened. I know. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry, genuinely, not strategically. He pulled out his wallet, and Lena's expression immediately hardened. If you try to leave some ridiculous tip again, just paying for breakfast, and maybe... Adrian stopped, weighing his next words carefully. Maybe asking if you'd be willing to hear me out one more time. Not right now, not when you're working, But when you have time to actually think about it, think about what? A proposal. A real one this time, not an insult dressed up as an opportunity. He could see the skepticism on her face and rushed ahead. I still need help with my mother, but instead of asking you to lie, I'm asking if you'd be willing to have dinner with me, as yourself, just to see if we could actually stand each other long enough to make this work. Make what work? I don't know yet. That's why I'm asking for dinner, not a contract. Adrian stood up, signaling to Ethan that it was time to go. Think about it. No pressure, no obligations, just dinner and an honest conversation about whether this ridiculous idea could possibly work for both of us. Lena stared at him like he'd just proposed something insane, which, to be fair, he had. You're serious? Completely. You want to take me to dinner to discuss whether I'd be willing to pretend to be your wife at future events. When you put it like that, it sounds terrible. It is terrible. Probably. Adrian pulled out a business card, writing his personal cell number on the back. But it's also honest, and I think, after last night, we both value honesty. He set the card on the table between them, along with enough cash to cover breakfast and a reasonable tip. Not excessive, not insulting, just fair. Ethan appeared at his elbow, bouncing with 7-year-old energy. Can we come back here? The barista taught me about crema. That's the foam on top of espresso. It's super important. We'll see, buddy. Adrian looked at Lena one more time. Thank you for your time, and for being honest. She picked up the business card, turning it over in her fingers. I haven't said yes. I know, but you haven't said no either. Don't get cocky, Mr. Cole. Adrian. Don't get cocky, Adrian. He couldn't help smiling. Yes, ma'am. As they walked out, Ethan said loudly enough for the entire bistro to hear, I like her, Dad. She's way better than that Charlotte lady Grandma wanted you to meet. Adrian groaned. Ethan. What? It's true. In the rearview mirror, Adrian could see Lena still standing by their table, the business card in her hand, her expression unreadable. Think she'll call? Ethan asked as they pulled away from the curb. Honestly, I have no idea. I think she will. Ethan said it with the absolute certainty of someone who'd never had their heart broken. She looked at you like you were a puzzle she wanted to solve. Adrian wasn't sure that was a good thing, but he didn't argue. Instead, he drove his son to school, went to the office, sat through 3 meetings and 7 conference calls, and tried not to check his phone every 5 minutes. By 6 p.m., she still hadn't called. By 8, he'd convinced himself she'd thrown the card away. By 10, he was in his home office, pretending to review the Singapore contracts while actually staring at his phone like a teenager waiting for a text. At 10:47, his phone finally buzzed. Unknown number. Text message. This is Lena Hayes. I'll meet you for dinner, but I have conditions. Adrian's heart did something complicated in his chest. Name them. He typed back. The response took 3 minutes that felt like hours. 1. This is just a conversation. I'm not agreeing to anything. Agreed. 2. No expensive restaurants. Somewhere normal where we can actually talk. Your choice. You pick the place. Another pause. 3. You answer my questions honestly, all of them, even the ones you don't want to answer. Adrian stared at that last message, knowing what she was really asking. She wanted to understand why he'd made such a stupid offer. Wanted to see if there was a real person underneath the billionaire persona, or if he was just another entitled rich guy who thought money solved everything. Deal, he sent back. When? Tomorrow. 7 p.m. I'll text you the address. I'll be there. The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally. Don't make me regret this, Adrian. He looked at that message for a long time before responding. I'll do my best. The dots appeared one more time, then stopped. No response. Just the weight of a promise neither of them was sure he could keep. Adrian set down his phone and walked to the window, looking out at Manhattan's endless lights. Somewhere out there, Lena Hayes was probably second-guessing her decision, wondering if she'd just made a terrible mistake. He wondered the same thing. But for the first time in 3 years, he also felt something that might have been hope. Not the strategic hope of a good business deal or a successful acquisition. Something smaller, more fragile, more real. The hope that maybe, just maybe, he could be more than the man he'd become. His phone buzzed one more time. He grabbed it, expecting another condition from Lena, but instead saw his mother's name. The Vanderbergs are very disappointed. Charlotte was quite upset. "We need to talk about your future, Adrian. This can't continue." "Mother." Adrian deleted the message without responding. His future was walking into a restaurant tomorrow night to have an honest conversation with a woman who'd already called him out on his worst behavior. His future was figuring out if he could be the kind of person who deserved a second chance. Everything else could wait. He poured himself a scotch, pulled out his laptop, and started researching Lena Hayes. Not because he wanted to find ammunition or leverage. He was done with that approach. But because if she was going to ask him hard questions, he owed it to her to understand what she might be hiding behind those sad, knowing eyes. What he found made him set down his drink and stare at the screen in disbelief. Lena Hayes wasn't just a waitress. She was a ghost. And tomorrow night, he was going to find out why. The search results on Adrian's laptop screen glowed in the darkness of his office, and what he found made his chest tighten in a way he hadn't expected. Lena Marie Hayes, age 30, former associate at Brennan and Cross, one of Manhattan's most prestigious law firms, graduated top of her class from Columbia Law, landed a position that most attorneys would kill for, and then nothing, just a gap. 3 years of absolute silence before her name disappeared from every legal database, every professional registry, every trace of the career she'd built. But it was the archived news article from 4 years ago that made Adrian lean closer to the screen, his scotch forgotten. Rising star attorney implicated in client fraud scheme. Brennan and Cross launches internal investigation. The photo showed a younger Lena in a sharp suit, her hair pulled back, her expression caught somewhere between shock and devastation as she left the courthouse. The article was sparse on details, heavy on innuendo. Allegations of insider trading, falsified documents, breach of fiduciary duty. Her name attached to a senior partner's crimes like she'd been complicit rather than deceived. Adrian scrolled further, finding smaller articles, follow-up pieces that grew increasingly vicious. Hayes unable to provide alibi. Brennan and Cross cuts ties with disgraced associate. Former rising star faces license suspension pending investigation. And then, abruptly, the story died. No resolution, no trial, no public vindication or conviction. Just silence, like someone had pulled a curtain over the whole mess and decided to move on. Someone named Daniel Mercer kept appearing in the footnotes. Senior partner, Lena's mentor, the man whose fraud scheme had somehow landed on her shoulders instead of his. Adrian pulled up Mercer's current profile. Still practicing law, still partner at a different firm, still attending galas and charity events like nothing had ever happened. There were photos of him from just last month at some legal conference, shaking hands with judges and senators, his smile wide and confident, while Lena served coffee in a bistro, hiding behind a name tag and a carefully constructed invisibility. Adrian closed his laptop slowly, the full weight of what he'd done settling over him like concrete. He hadn't just insulted a waitress, he'd insulted a woman who'd already been betrayed, discredited, and destroyed by people who thought they could use her and throw her away. And his first instinct had been to do exactly the same thing. "Christ," he muttered into the empty room. "I really am an asshole." His phone buzzed with the address Lena had promised. Lucia's. Corner of 8th and 43rd. "It's a hole in the wall, but the food's good. 7 p.m. sharp." Adrian typed the restaurant name into his search, half expecting some trendy spot he'd somehow missed. Instead, he found a family-owned Italian place with a 2-star Yelp rating, complaints about slow service, and exactly 3 photos that made it look like someone's grandmother's dining room. Perfect. He texted back, "See you there." Sleep didn't come easily that night. Adrian lay in his too-large bed in his too-quiet apartment, staring at the ceiling and running through conversation scenarios that all ended badly. Every approach felt wrong, too formal, too casual, too much like he was trying to manage the situation instead of just being honest. Finally, around 3 a.m., he gave up and went to check on Ethan. His son was sprawled across his bed in a position that looked anatomically impossible, one arm hanging off the side, his dinosaur encyclopedia open on the floor where it had fallen. Adrian picked up the book, marked the page, and set it on the nightstand. Then he sat on the edge of Ethan's bed, just watching him sleep, trying to remember the last time he'd felt this uncertain about anything. I don't know what I'm doing, buddy, he whispered to his unconscious son. But I'm trying. That has to count for something, right? Ethan snored softly, completely unhelpful. The next day crawled by with the speed of continental drift. Adrian sat through morning meetings without absorbing a single word, approved budgets he didn't read, and snapped at his assistant twice before apologizing both times. Sir, are you feeling all right? Jessica asked carefully, setting down his fourth coffee of the day. You seem distracted. I'm fine, just tired. You've been checking your phone every 30 seconds. I'm expecting an important call. From the same person you've been researching since last night? The one whose name you searched 17 times on our network? Jessica raised an eyebrow. It flagged it as unusual activity. I told them it was fine, but they wanted me to check if you'd been hacked. Adrian closed his eyes. Is nothing private anymore? Not when you use company systems to stalk someone at 2:30 in the morning? No. She set down a folder he hadn't asked for. For what it's worth, whoever she is, she must be important if you're this nervous. I'm not nervous. Sir, I've worked for you for 6 years. I've seen you nervous exactly twice. Once when Ethan had pneumonia, and once when the SEC launched that investigation. This is the same face. Adrian glared at her, but she just smiled serenely and left him alone with his anxiety and his increasingly cold coffee. By 6:30, he was sitting in his car outside Lucia's, watching people come and go through the restaurant's smudged windows. It looked exactly like the photos suggested. Cramped, outdated, with checkered tablecloths that had definitely seen better decades. A far cry from the Michelin-starred places his mother preferred, or the trendy spots where business deals happened over tiny portions and enormous wine lists. His phone buzzed. Lena. I'm here, corner table in the back. Adrian took a breath, straightened his tie, and realized he was wearing a $3,000 suit to a restaurant where the dress code was probably shirt required. He loosened the tie, left his jacket in the car, and walked in feeling more exposed than he had in years. Lena sat at a corner table, partially hidden behind a wine-stained partition, wearing jeans and a simple gray sweater that somehow made her look more intimidating than any power suit could have. Her hair was down, falling past her shoulders in dark waves, and she had a glass of red wine in front of her that was already half empty. You're early, Adrian said, sliding into the seat across from her. I needed the head start. She gestured to her wine. Liquid courage. Don't judge. I would never. Adrian flagged down a passing waiter, an older man with a magnificent mustache and an expression that suggested he'd seen everything twice. Whatever she's having, and a menu, please. Menus are on the table, wine is Chianti, food is good. Don't send anything back to the kitchen or my wife will come out here and you don't want that. The waiter nodded at Lena. Good to see you, sweetheart. Your usual? Thanks, Marco. After he left, Adrian said, You're a regular. I live 3 blocks away, and Marco's wife makes the best carbonara in Manhattan. Lena took another sip of wine. Plus, nobody here cares who I am or what I used to be. That's worth more than Michelin stars. There it was, laid out between them like a challenge. Adrian could pretend he hadn't done his research, could play ignorant and let her reveal things at her own pace. Or he could be honest. Lena Marie Hayes, he said quietly, Columbia Law, class of 2019. Associate at Brennan & Cross until 4 years ago, when Daniel Mercer's fraud scheme fell apart, and you got blamed for it. Lena's expression didn't change, but her knuckles went white around her wine glass. You looked me up. I did. Find everything you wanted? I found a lot of questions and very few answers. Adrian leaned forward. The articles all stopped covering the story before any resolution. No trial, no exoneration, nothing, just silence. That's because there was a settlement. Lena's voice was flat, emotionless. Daniel had powerful friends. I had student loans and a public defender who could barely remember my name. They offered me a deal, drop the countersuit, accept a 3-year license suspension, sign an NDA that would make a CIA agent jealous, and in exchange, they wouldn't pursue criminal charges. But you didn't do anything wrong. No, I didn't. She finished her wine in one swallow. But I also couldn't prove it. Daniel had been my mentor for 2 years. He'd built a perfect paper trail that made it look like I'd been his accomplice instead of his patsy. My signature on documents I'd never read. My access codes used to transfer funds I'd never touched. My name attached to emails I'd never sent. How? He was smart, and I was naive. Lena signaled for another glass of wine, her hand steady despite the tremor in her voice. I trusted him, completely. When he asked me to sign things, I signed. When he needed my passwords for system updates, I gave them to him. I thought I was being a good associate, learning from the best. Instead, I was building my own gallows. Marco returned with Adrian's wine and Lena's refill, setting them down with a gentle pat on her shoulder that suggested he knew at least part of this story. You want I should bring food now, or you need more time to drink? Bring food, Lena said. 2 carbonaras and bread. You got it, sweetheart. After he left, Adrian said carefully, You could have fought it, taken it to trial. With what money? What evidence? I was 26 years old, drowning in debt, up against a senior partner with connections to half the judges in New York. Lena's laugh was bitter. My lawyer, the one I could barely afford, told me to take the deal. Said I was lucky they weren't pushing for jail time. Said I should be grateful. That's not justice. No, it's survival. She met his eyes across the table. So I took the deal. Signed away 3 years of my career, my reputation, and my right to ever tell anyone what really happened. Spent the first year trying to find firms that would hire me despite the suspension. Spent the second year waiting tables and pretending I'd never wanted to be a lawyer anyway. Spent the third year convincing myself that maybe this was better, safer, simpler. And Daniel Mercer? Still practicing, still mentoring young associates. Still playing the respectable partner while people like me serve him coffee and pretend we don't recognize him. The pain in her voice was raw, unfiltered. I saw him 2 months ago at the bistro. He didn't recognize me, looked right through me like I was furniture. Adrian felt rage building in his chest, the kind of cold fury that had fueled some of his most aggressive business moves. Your suspension is over. You could practice again. In theory. Lena traced patterns in the condensation on her wine glass. In practice, I've got a 3-year gap on my resume, no references worth mentioning, and a name that's probably still flagged in every HR database in the legal world. Even if I could get hired, do you know what it's like to walk into a courtroom knowing everyone's Googled you? Knowing they've read the articles, seen the photos, formed their opinions? I do, actually. Adrian's voice was quiet. Different circumstances, but yeah, I know exactly what that's like. Lena looked at him then, really looked, like she was seeing past the expensive watch and the careful grooming to the person underneath. Vanessa Winters. Vanessa Winters. Adrian took a drink, the wine sharp and good. Cheated on me with my business partner, leaked confidential information to our competitors, and then played the victim so convincingly that half of Manhattan society still thinks I drove her to it. That's why you hide behind work. That's why I hide behind work. He'd never admitted it so baldly before, not even to himself. It's easier than trusting people, safer than opening up, and definitely less painful than getting betrayed again. Marco arrived with 2 plates of carbonara that smelled like heaven and looked like someone's Italian grandmother had personally blessed them. He set them down with a flourish, added fresh ground pepper without asking, and disappeared again. They ate in silence for a few minutes, the food providing a welcome distraction from the emotional minefield they were navigating. The pasta was perfect, creamy without being heavy, rich without being overwhelming. Exactly what Adrian needed without knowing he needed it. So, Lena said finally, twirling pasta on her fork, you want to hire the disgraced ex-lawyer to pretend to be your wife. That's your brilliant plan? When you put it like that, it sounds insane. It is insane. Probably. Adrian set down his fork. But here's the truth. I need someone who understands what it's like to be judged by everyone in the room. Someone who knows how to wear a mask because they've had to do it to survive. Someone who won't expect this to turn into some fairy tale romance because they're too practical for that nonsense. You're describing a business transaction. I'm describing a partnership based on honesty and mutual benefit instead of lies and manipulation. He paused. You need money to restart your career. I need someone to get my mother off my back and help me navigate social situations without losing my mind. We both need to prove we're more than what other people have decided we are. Lena was quiet for a long moment, her expression unreadable. What exactly are you proposing? Dinner at my mother's house, maybe a few galas? Enough appearances to convince her I'm not going to die alone and miserable, so she'll stop parading strangers in front of my son. Adrian pulled out his phone, opening his notes app. In exchange, I pay you $5,000 per event. No strings, no expectations beyond showing up and being yourself. And when you're ready to go back to practicing law, I'll use every connection I have to help you do it. Why would you do that? Because I can, and because you deserve better than what happened to you. He met her eyes. And maybe because I need to prove to myself that I'm capable of doing something decent instead of just profitable. Lena studied him like he was a contract she was considering signing, looking for the loopholes and hidden clauses. What about your son, Ethan? You're okay with him meeting someone you're paying to be there? The question hit harder than Adrian expected. That's a good point. I hadn't thought about that. You need to think about that. Kids aren't stupid. They can tell when something's fake. She pushed her plate aside, leaning forward. If we do this, and I'm not saying we are, but if we do, he can't know. It would mess him up, wondering which parts of his life are real and which are performance. So what do we tell him? The truth. Sort of. Lena's mind was clearly working through scenarios. We're seeing each other, casually. No promises, no pressure. Just two people who met and decided to spend some time together. That way, if it doesn't work out, there's no trauma. And if it does, she stopped, like she'd said too much. If it does? Let's not get ahead of ourselves. But there was something in her voice, something that suggested she'd considered the possibility more than she wanted to admit. Adrian's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, saw his mother's name, and put it face down on the table without reading the message. She's persistent, Lena observed. You have no idea. Adrian ran a hand through his hair. She means well, she really does. But she's convinced that I'm wasting my life being bitter and alone, and she's determined to fix it whether I want her to or not. What if we can't convince her? What if she sees right through this? Then we tried. And at least I'll have a few peaceful evenings before she escalates to arranging my marriage herself. Lena laughed at that, a real laugh that transformed her face from guarded to almost beautiful. You're serious? She'd actually do that. My mother once hired a private investigator to vet a woman I'd been on 3 dates with, found out she had a DUI from college, and presented me with a full dossier over breakfast. Adrian smiled at the memory despite himself. She means well, but she has absolutely no boundaries. Sounds terrifying. She'd like you, actually. You're smart, you speak your mind, and you're not impressed by money. He paused. Fair warning, she'll interrogate you like you're applying for a Supreme Court position. I've been interrogated by federal prosecutors. I think I can handle your mother. Don't underestimate Patricia Cole. They finished their meal, the conversation drifting to safer topics. Ethan's dinosaur obsession, Lena's tiny apartment with the broken radiator, Adrian's complete inability to cook anything more complicated than toast. The wine disappeared, Marco brought tiramisu without being asked, and somehow 2 hours passed without either of them noticing. Finally, as Marco brought the check, Lena said, If I agree to this, and I'm still not sure I will, I have conditions. Name them. First, we do this my way. No surprises, no scripts, no trying to make me into someone I'm not. I show up as myself or I don't show up at all. Agreed. Second, you're honest with me. About everything. Your mother, your ex, your expectations, all of it. The second I feel like you're manipulating me, I'm out. Fair. Third, we set boundaries around Ethan. He deserves stability, not some revolving door of his dad's girlfriends. If this is going to work, we need to be careful about what he sees and when. Adrian felt something warm settle in his chest at the way she automatically prioritized his son's well-being. Absolutely. And fourth, Lena hesitated, her fingers drumming on the table. You helped me get my career back. Not with money, with connections, recommendations, opportunities. I don't want charity. I want a fair shot at proving I'm still good at what I do. Done. I know at least a dozen firms that would be lucky to have you. You don't know that. You've never seen me practice law. I've seen you stand up to a billionaire who insulted you. I've seen you protect your dignity when someone offered you money to compromise it. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. Adrian reached across the table, stopping just short of touching her hand. You're brilliant, Lena. Anyone who can't see that is an idiot. She stared at his almost touching hand for a long moment, then slowly reached out to close the gap. Her fingers were warm, her grip surprisingly strong. "One event," she said firmly. "Your mother's dinner. That's all I'm committing to right now. If it's a disaster, we walk away and pretend this never happened. And if it works, then we talk about what comes next." She squeezed his hand once, then pulled back. "But I'm serious, Adrian. One event. Don't push." "I won't." They split the check despite Adrian's protests, walked out into the cool Manhattan night, and stood on the sidewalk in awkward silence. "So," Lena said finally, "when's this dinner?" "Friday night, 6 o'clock. I'll pick you up at 5:30 so we have time to strategize." "Strategize, like it's a military operation." "You haven't met my mother." Lena laughed again, and Adrian realized he was starting to really like that sound. "Text me the address. And the dress code. I'm guessing my waitress uniform won't cut it." "Actually, wear whatever makes you comfortable. My mother values authenticity over fashion." He paused. "Mostly." "That's not reassuring." "It's not meant to be." Adrian's phone buzzed again, insistent. "I should take this." "But Lena, thank you for giving me a chance to not be the asshole who insulted you." "You're still kind of an asshole, but you're trying." She pulled her jacket tighter against the wind. "That counts for something." "What?" She turned to leave, and Adrian called after her. "Wait, how are you getting home?" "Subway, like a normal person." "Let me drive you. My car's right here." "I'm not getting in your fancy car, Adrian. That crosses about 15 boundaries we just established. It's just a ride home, not a marriage proposal." Lena hesitated, clearly torn between practicality and pride. Finally, she sighed. "Fine, but if you try to give me some ridiculous tip for my time, I'm throwing myself out of the moving vehicle." Noted. The drive to her apartment in Hell's Kitchen took 12 minutes and passed in comfortable silence, the city lights streaming past the windows. When they pulled up to a building that had definitely seen better decades, Lena unbuckled her seatbelt but didn't immediately get out. "Adrian?" "Yeah?" "Why are you really doing this? And don't give me the line about your mother. There has to be more to it than that." He thought about lying, about giving her the safe answer that wouldn't expose too much. But they'd promised honesty, and he needed to start somewhere. "Because when you looked at me in that bistro and told me I was out of line, you saw me. Not my money, not my reputation, not the persona I've built. Just me, being an entitled jerk." He stared straight ahead at the cracked sidewalk. "And I realized I've been surrounding myself with people who only see what they want from me. You're the first person in years who expected me to be better." Lena was quiet for a moment. "That's a lot of pressure to put on someone you just met." "I know. I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. Just don't expect me to fix you. I can barely fix myself." She opened the door, pausing halfway out. "Friday, 5:30. Don't be late." "I won't." "And Adrian, wear something less intimidating than a three-piece suit. You're meeting my mother, not the board of directors." "Your mother?" Lena grinned. "Typo. Your mother. Definitely your mother. Though honestly, mine would probably be scarier." She was gone before he could respond, disappearing into her building with a wave that might have been friendly or might have been dismissive. Adrian sat there for a moment, watching the light in what he assumed was her window flicker on 3 floors up. His phone buzzed again. This time, he answered. "Adrian James Cole, you've been ignoring my calls for 2 days." His mother's voice could have cut glass. "Where have you been?" "Working, and I'm not ignoring you. I'm busy." "Too busy for family? For your responsibilities?" A pause, heavy with meaning. "The Vanderbergs are very disappointed. Charlotte thought you two had a connection." Charlotte thought wrong. "Adrian, Mother, I appreciate your concern. I really do. But I need you to stop setting me up with women I have no interest in." "Then what do you suggest? You can't spend the rest of your life alone, Adrian. Ethan deserves—" "I'm seeing someone." The words came out before he'd fully planned them, and the silence on the other end of the line was deafening. "You're what?" "Seeing someone. Her name is Lena. We've been getting to know each other, and I'd like you to meet her." Adrian couldn't believe the words coming out of his mouth, but now that he'd started, he had to commit. Friday night, dinner at your place, if that works for you. Another pause, this one even more loaded than the last. Who is she? What does she do? How did you meet? All questions you can ask her on Friday. 6 o'clock. I'll bring wine. Adrian, if this is some ploy to get me to stop introducing you to suitable women, it's not a ploy. It's me asking you to meet someone important to me. Can you do that without the interrogation? I make no promises, but there was something in his mother's voice that might have been approval or surprise or possibly both. Friday at 6. Don't be late. And Adrian, she better be real, or we're going to have a very serious conversation about your attitude. She's real, Mother. I promise. After she hung up, Adrian sat in his car outside Lena's building and realized what he'd just done. He'd committed them both to dinner with his mother, the woman who'd vetted Vanessa with private investigators and probably had connections to half the intelligence community. This was either going to be a disaster or a miracle, and Adrian had no idea which. He texted Lena, "Just told my mother about you. Friday dinner is officially on. Sorry for the short notice." The response came 30 seconds later. "You did what?" She was pressuring me. I panicked. "So you told her about the fake girlfriend you haven't even officially hired yet?" "Technically, you agreed to one event." "This better count as that one event, Adrian. I'm not signing up for an indefinite arrangement after one dinner. Deal. Friday counts." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, what have I gotten myself into? Adrian smiled at his phone. Honestly, I have no idea. But it should be interesting. That's not reassuring. It's not meant to be. He drove home through the Manhattan night, already dreading and anticipating Friday in equal measure. When he got back to the penthouse, Ethan was supposedly asleep, but clearly reading under his covers with a flashlight. "Busted," Adrian said from the doorway, and Ethan jumped. "Dad, I was just reading about pteranodons when you should be sleeping. I know." Adrian sat on the edge of the bed. 5 more minutes, then lights out for real. Deal. Ethan studied his father's face with unnerving perception. "You look happy. Did something good happen?" "Maybe. We'll see." "Is it about the lady from the restaurant? Miss Lena?" Adrian's heart skipped. "What makes you say that?" "You've been weird since we went there, checking your phone a lot, smiling at nothing." Ethan grinned his gap-toothed grin. "You like her." "It's complicated, buddy. Grown-ups always say that when they mean yes." Ethan returned to his book, apparently satisfied with this assessment. "I like her too. She seemed nice, and she didn't talk to me like I was stupid, like Grandma's friends do." "Yeah, she is nice." Adrian ruffled his son's hair. 4 more minutes now, then sleep. "Dad?" "Yeah?" "Are you going to bring her to meet Grandma?" The kid was too smart for his own good. "Actually, yes. Friday night. Think you can be on your best behavior?" Ethan's eyes went wide. "Really? You're bringing her to meet Grandma? That's serious, Dad." "How do you even know that?" "I watch TV. I know things." He paused. "Does this mean she might stick around?" Adrian felt his chest tighten at the hope in his son's voice. "I don't know, buddy. We're just getting to know each other. But yeah, she'll be at Grandma's on Friday." "Okay, I'll be extra good. I'll wear my nice shirt and everything." Ethan's excitement was palpable. "Maybe I can tell her about the new dinosaur they discovered in Argentina. It's called, you can tell her all about it on Friday. Right now, sleep. 3 more minutes. 2. Deal." Adrian left his son to his dinosaurs and walked to his own room, already planning the impossible task of preparing Lena for Patricia Cole's particular brand of maternal scrutiny. This was going to be interesting and terrifying, and possibly the biggest mistake he'd made in years. But for the first time since Vanessa had walked out, Adrian felt like he was moving forward instead of just treading water in his own carefully controlled life. That had to count for something. Friday arrived with the inevitability of a tax audit. Adrian spent the morning in back-to-back meetings that he couldn't focus on, the afternoon reviewing contracts he didn't actually read, and the hour before he was supposed to pick up Lena staring at his closet like it held answers to questions he hadn't figured out how to ask yet. "The Navy suit, sir." Jessica appeared in his office doorway with the timing of someone who'd been waiting for exactly this crisis. Not the black one. That's too formal. Not the gray one. That's too business. Navy says, "I'm taking this seriously, but not trying too hard." "When did you become a fashion consultant?" when you started texting me at 6 a.m. about what casual but respectful means. She set down a garment bag he hadn't asked for. Also, lose the tie. Your mother's house is in a board meeting. Adrian wanted to argue but couldn't find the energy. Has anyone ever told you you're slightly terrifying? Daily. That's why you pay me. Jessica headed for the door, then paused. She must be pretty special if you're this nervous. I'm not nervous. Sir, you've rescheduled the Singapore call 3 times. You forgot Martin Chen was in your office for 20 minutes this morning, and you've been to the bathroom 6 times in the past hour. Jessica smiled. That's nervous. After she left, Adrian changed into the navy suit, no tie like she'd suggested, and caught his reflection in the window. He looked exactly like what he was, a man trying very hard to appear calm while internally spiraling. His phone buzzed with a text from Lena. Please tell me your mother doesn't own any lie detectors, just the psychological kind. You'll be fine. That's not reassuring. It's not meant to be. Adrian grabbed the wine he'd selected, a Bordeaux that had cost more than some people's monthly rent, but would hopefully satisfy his mother's exacting standards, and headed down to the car. Ethan was spending the evening with Maria, which was probably for the best. Adding his son's unfiltered commentary to an already tense dinner felt like a recipe for disaster. The drive to Lena's building took 15 minutes through Friday evening traffic, and Adrian spent every second of it rehearsing conversation starters that all sounded forced and artificial. So ready to meet my terrifying mother? No. Don't worry, she only eats people who show weakness. Worse. If this goes badly, we can fake a fire alarm. Actually, that one had potential. Lena was waiting outside her building when he pulled up, and Adrian nearly drove past her because she looked nothing like the waitress in the simple uniform or the woman in jeans at dinner. She wore a deep green dress that hit just below her knees, elegant without being showy, expensive looking without being flashy. Her hair was pulled back in a low twist, and she'd done something with makeup that made her eyes look even more striking. She slid into the passenger seat with the practiced ease of someone who'd grown up navigating worlds that didn't quite fit. You clean up well, Adrian said, then immediately regretted how that sounded. I mean, I know what you mean. You don't look terrible yourself. Lena buckled her seatbelt, her fingers drumming nervously on her clutch. Okay, brief me. What do I need to know about your mother that won't send me running back into my apartment? Adrian pulled into traffic, grateful for something to do with his hands. Patricia Cole, age 62, widowed 15 years, runs 3 charities and sits on the board of 2 museums. She's brilliant, ruthless, and has absolutely no filter. Sounds delightful. She means well. She just has very specific ideas about how the world should work, and she's not shy about enforcing them. He glanced at Lena. She's going to ask you very personal questions. Don't take it personally. She interrogates everyone. What kind of questions? Your family background, your education, your intentions with me, your 5-year plan, your thoughts on child rearing, even though that's completely inappropriate. Adrian merged onto the FDR. And she'll probably ask why someone like you would be interested in someone like me. Someone like me. Smart, independent, not obviously after my money. He paused. She's been burned before. By Vanessa, obviously, but also by other women who saw me as a means to an end. She's protective. And suspicious. Very suspicious. Lena was quiet for a moment, watching the city slide past. What did you tell her about me? About how we met? The truth, sort of, that we met at a restaurant, got to talking, and I was interested enough to pursue it. Adrian kept his eyes on the road. I left out the part where I insulted you and you shut me down hard. Probably wise. She shifted in her seat. What about my background? Did you tell her about the law thing? No, that's your story to tell if you want to tell it. I just said you were taking some time to figure out your next move professionally. Which is technically true. Which is technically true. They drove in silence for a few minutes before Lena said, I'm terrified. Yeah, me too. You face down investors and hostile takeovers for a living. Those make sense. They have rules, strategies, predictable outcomes. Adrian took the exit toward his mother's Upper East Side townhouse. This is my mother deciding whether you're good enough for her son and grandson. There are no rules for that. So what's the strategy? Be yourself. Answer honestly. Don't let her intimidate you. He pulled up to a red light, finally looking at her. And remember, this is one dinner. If it's awful, we walk away and pretend we never met. That's the worst pep talk I've ever heard. I'm not good at pep talks. Clearly. The light turned green, and Adrian navigated the final few blocks to his childhood home, a 4-story brownstone that his mother had meticulously maintained since his father's death. Warm light glowed from the windows, and he could see movement inside that meant she was probably rearranging furniture for the 15th time. Last chance to run, Adrian said as he pulled up to the curb. Not helping. But Lena was already reaching for the door handle, her jaw set with determination. Let's get this over with. They climbed the front steps together, Adrian carrying the wine like a shield. He rang the doorbell. His mother insisted on the formality even for family, and tried to ignore the way his heart was hammering. The door swung open to reveal Patricia Cole in all her terrifying glory. She was smaller than most people expected, barely 5'4", but she commanded space like a general surveying a battlefield. Her silver hair was cut in a sharp bob, her black dress was probably vintage Chanel, and her eyes, the same dark brown as Adrian's, missed absolutely nothing. Adrian, you're 2 minutes late. Her gaze shifted to Lena, conducting a full assessment in approximately 3 seconds. And you must be the mysterious Lena. Mrs. Cole, thank you for having me. Lena extended her hand with the confidence of someone who'd negotiated with hostile witnesses. Adrian's told me so much about you. I'm sure he has. None of it flattering, I imagine. Patricia shook her hand firmly, then stepped back. Come in, both of you. Dinner's nearly ready, and I want to get a proper look at you before my son tries to monopolize your attention. The townhouse interior was exactly as Adrian remembered. Tasteful, expensive, and utterly intimidating. Persian rugs on hardwood floors, artwork that belonged in museums, and enough family photos to remind everyone that the Coles had standards to uphold. Patricia led them to the sitting room, where a fire was already burning despite the mild evening. Wine, Lena? Or would you prefer something stronger? I find wine doesn't quite cut it when meeting the family. Wine would be lovely, thank you. Lena settled onto the sofa with the kind of posture that suggested finishing school or excellent self-discipline. Adrian handed over the Bordeaux, which his mother examined with the intensity of a gemologist inspecting a diamond. 2015, decent year. Did Jessica pick this out for you? How did you? Because you have excellent taste in assistants and terrible taste in wine. Patricia poured 3 glasses anyway, handing one to Lena. So, tell me about yourself. Adrian's been frustratingly vague. What would you like to know? Everything. Where you're from, what you do, Sally, how you met my son, why you're tolerating him. Patricia settled into her chair with the air of someone settling in for a long interrogation. Start wherever you'd like. Lena took a sip of wine, and Adrian could see her mind working. I grew up in Brooklyn, graduated from Columbia. I've been working in the service industry while figuring out my next career move. She met Patricia's gaze directly. And I met your son when he came into the restaurant where I work and made a complete fool of himself. Adrian choked on his wine. Patricia's eyebrows rose. Did he now? He did, said something remarkably stupid, got called out for it, and then had the decency to come back the next day and apologize. Lena's tone was conversational, like she was discussing the weather. Most men would have just moved on. He surprised me by actually trying to be better. Patricia's expression was unreadable. What did he say? The stupid thing? Mother, Adrian tried to interrupt, but Lena spoke over him. He offered me money to pretend to be his wife for an evening, which was insulting on about 7 different levels. The silence in the room was deafening. Adrian seriously considered whether jumping out a window would be less painful than the rest of this conversation. Then Patricia laughed. Actually laughed, a sound Adrian hadn't heard in years. Did he really? She looked at her son with something that might have been pride or might have been exasperation. Adrian, you idiot. In my defense, there is no defense for that. Patricia turned back to Lena. And you told him off, I assume? Thoroughly. Then he came back with an actual apology and a better offer. Lena smiled slightly. Dinner and honest conversation instead of a business transaction. Smart woman. Patricia refilled her own glass. So this dinner, tonight, is part of that arrangement? The question hung in the air like a sword. Adrian opened his mouth to lie, to deflect, to do anything but admit the truth. But Lena spoke first. Originally, yes. Adrian needed help with family pressure, and I needed— She paused, choosing her words carefully. I needed to remember what it felt like to be seen as more than my worst mistakes. Patricia set down her glass very carefully. What mistakes would those be? Mother, that's not— It's fine, Adrian. Lena's voice was steady despite the tension in her shoulders. 4 years ago, I worked at a law firm. My mentor was running a fraud scheme and pinned it on me when it fell apart. I lost my license, my reputation, and my career. Spent 3 years in legal limbo before the suspension ended. She met Patricia's eyes. I'm not ashamed of who I am, Mrs. Cole, but I'm also not naive enough to think that history won't affect how people see me. Adrian watched his mother process this information, her expression cycling through surprise, calculation, and something that looked like respect. You're a lawyer, Patricia said finally. I was. I will be again, when I'm ready. And Adrian knows all this? He looked me up. Found the old articles, the accusations, all of it. Lena glanced at Adrian. Then he decided I was worth a second chance anyway. Patricia studied them both for a long moment, her sharp eyes missing nothing. So let me see if I understand. My son insulted you, you put him in his place, he apologized, you agreed to this dinner as part of an arrangement, and somewhere along the way you both decided to be honest about it? That's basically accurate, Adrian admitted. Good. Patricia stood up abruptly. Dinner's ready. We'll eat while you tell me more about this fraud case and why you took the fall instead of fighting. She swept out of the room, leaving Adrian and Lena staring at each other in confusion. Did that go well or terribly? Lena whispered. I honestly have no idea. Dinner was served in the formal dining room, which Adrian suspected his mother had chosen specifically to maximize intimidation. The table could seat 12, but was set for 3, making the space feel even more cavernous. His mother sat at the head, naturally, with Adrian and Lena on either side. The first course was a French onion soup that their longtime housekeeper, Margaret, had been perfecting for 30 years. Patricia waited until they were all served before resuming her interrogation. So, this Daniel Mercer, he's still practicing? Lena nodded, her spoon pausing halfway to her mouth. Partner at Hastings and Webb now. Still taking on associates, still mentoring young lawyers. And you signed an NDA? As part of the settlement, I can't discuss the specific allegations or evidence, but I can talk about the outcome. Which was? 3-year suspension, no criminal charges, a reputation that's basically radioactive in legal circles. Lena took a sip of soup, her composure impressive. I made the best choice I could with the options I had. Some days I think it was the right choice, other days I'm less sure. Patricia made a non-committal sound. And now? What's your plan? To practice law again. Eventually. When I have the resources and support to do it without getting crushed by the first firm that Googles my name. Resources meaning money. Resources meaning connections, recommendations, someone willing to vouch for me who hasn't been paid to do it. Lena set down her spoon. I'm good at what I do, Mrs. Cole. I was top of my class at Columbia, had 3 firms competing for me during recruitment, and was on track to make junior partner before everything fell apart. I just need someone to give me a chance to prove I'm still that person. Adrian watched his mother's face carefully, trying to read her reaction. Patricia Cole had built her reputation on reading people, on knowing who was worth investing in and who would disappoint. He'd seen her eviscerate people with a single cutting comment. He'd also seen her champion underdogs when she believed in them. You didn't ask my son for money, Patricia observed. No. Why not? He has plenty of it. Because I don't want to owe anyone anything, especially not someone I'm trying to build a relationship with, even if that relationship started as a business arrangement. Lena met Patricia's gaze steadily. Money complicates things. I'd rather keep this simple. Nothing about my son is simple. I'm starting to realize that. Patricia almost smiled. How old are you, Lena? 30. Adrian's 32. Did he tell you about Vanessa? Mother? Adrian tried to interrupt, but Patricia ignored him. Did he tell you she cheated on him with his business partner? That she leaked confidential information to their competitors? That she played the victim so convincingly that half of Manhattan still thinks Adrian drove her to it? He mentioned it, yes. Lena's voice was calm. And I told him about my own betrayal. Seemed fair. Fair, yeah? Patricia tested the word like it was foreign. How refreshing. Most women who've shown interest in my son lately have been very interested in his money and very uninterested in fairness. I'm not most women. No, you're not. Patricia signaled to Margaret for the next course, something with chicken and vegetables that smelled incredible. Adrian tells me you're good with Ethan. I've met him once. He seems like a great kid. He is. Smart, sensitive, entirely too perceptive for his own good. Patricia's expression softened fractionally. He's also been through a lot. Vanessa left when he was 4. He remembers her, asks questions about her, wants to know why she doesn't visit. That must be hard for him, Lena said quietly. It's destroyed Adrian. Patricia looked at her son with an expression that was pure maternal frustration. He's convinced himself that relationships are business transactions, that trust is a weakness, that the only safe thing is to keep everyone at arm's length, including his own son, sometimes. Mother, that's not... It is true, and you know it. Patricia turned back to Lena. So understand what you're getting into here. My son is brilliant, successful, and completely terrified of being hurt again. He'll try to manage this relationship like he manages his company, and you'll have to decide whether that's something you can work with or whether you'd rather walk away now. The words landed like a physical blow. Adrian felt exposed, seen in a way he hadn't asked for and definitely didn't want. But before he could respond, Lena spoke. With respect, Mrs. Cole, that's between Adrian and me. Her tone was gentle but firm. I appreciate your honesty, but I'm not interested in your son's money or his reputation or whatever version of him you think I should be worried about. I'm interested in the person who came back to apologize when he could have just moved on. The father who brings his kid to breakfast and listens when he talks about dinosaurs. The man who looked me in the eye and admitted he'd made a mistake. Patricia studied her for a long moment. You're either very brave or very foolish. Probably both. Good. Foolish people are boring, but brave ones are interesting. Patricia raised her wine glass. To interesting people making questionable decisions. Adrian raised his glass automatically, still trying to process what had just happened. Lena clinked hers against his mother's, then against his, and something passed between them that felt significant. They ate the main course in relative peace, the conversation drifting to safer topics, Patricia's latest charity project, the state of Manhattan real estate, whether Ethan's dinosaur obsession would evolve into actual paleontology. Adrian started to relax, started to think maybe this wasn't a complete disaster. Then the doorbell rang. Margaret appeared in the doorway, looking flustered. Mrs. Cole, I'm sorry, but there's... Patricia. The voice carried from the foyer with the confidence of someone who'd never been denied entrance. I know you're in here. I saw Adrian's car outside. Adrian's stomach dropped. He knew that voice. Vanessa swept into the dining room like she owned it, her red dress probably designed specifically to turn heads and cause trouble. Her smile was sharp, her eyes assessing, and she had her new boyfriend, tech entrepreneur Marcus something, trailing behind her like an accessory. Adrian, what a surprise! I didn't know you'd be here. Vanessa's gaze slid to Lena, conducting a full evaluation in 2 seconds. And who's this? Adrian stood slowly, his jaw tight. Vanessa, what are you doing here? I was having drinks with Marcus at the club around the corner. Patricia mentioned she was hosting dinner tonight, and I thought I'd stop by and say hello. She smiled at Patricia like they were old friends, which they absolutely were not. You don't mind, do you? Actually, Patricia started, but Vanessa was already pulling out a chair. This is Lena Hayes, Adrian said, his voice carefully controlled. Lena, this is Vanessa Winters and Marcus Chen. Lena stood, extending her hand with professional courtesy. Nice to meet you. Vanessa shook her hand with the kind of grip that was testing for weakness. Hayes. That name sounds familiar. Have we met? I don't think so. No, I definitely know that name from somewhere. Vanessa's eyes narrowed, her mind clearly working through possibilities. Wait, Lena Hayes. You're the lawyer who got caught up in that fraud thing a few years ago, the one who lost her license. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Vanessa, Adrian's voice was dangerous. That's enough. What? I'm just trying to place her. It was all over the legal blogs. Something about insider trading and falsified documents? Vanessa turned to Patricia with false concern. Did you know about this? I did, actually. Patricia's tone could have frozen nitrogen. Lena was just telling me about it before you barged in uninvited. Oh. Vanessa blinked, momentarily thrown. Then she rallied. Well, I hope you're being careful, Adrian. I'd hate to see you get hurt again. You're so trusting, and some people take advantage of that. Like you did? The words were out of Adrian's mouth before he could stop them. Marcus cleared his throat awkwardly. Maybe we should go. Vanessa, we have that reservation. In a minute. Vanessa's attention was fully on Lena now, predatory and focused. So what do you do now, Lena, since you can't practice law anymore? I can practice law, actually. The suspension ended 6 months ago. Lena's voice was steady, but Adrian could see the tension in her shoulders. I've been taking time to consider my options. Options? Right. Vanessa's smile was poisonous. And dating billionaires is one of those options? Vanessa. Patricia stood up, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. You need to leave. Now. I'm just looking out for Adrian. You lost the right to look out for my son when you cheated on him with his business partner and tried to destroy his company. Patricia's tone was arctic. Get out of my house. For a moment, Vanessa looked like she might argue. Then Marcus grabbed her elbow, murmuring something Adrian couldn't hear, and she allowed herself to be guided toward the door. But she paused in the doorway, looking back at Lena with a smile that promised trouble. Good luck with this one, Adrian. I'm sure she's exactly what she appears to be. The implication was clear, and before Adrian could respond, they were gone. The silence that followed was crushing. Lena sat down slowly, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for her wine glass. Well, that was fun. I'm so sorry. Adrian wanted to put his fist through a wall. She had no right. She had every right to ask questions. I'm the stranger at the table, remember? Lena took a long drink. And she wasn't wrong. My history is public record. Anyone can Google it. That doesn't give her permission to ambush you. No, but it's going to happen again, probably at every event we attend together, if we do this. Lena set down her glass, looking at him directly. Are you prepared for that? For people asking questions, making assumptions, treating me like a liability? Adrian opened his mouth to say yes, to insist it wouldn't matter, to promise he'd protect her. But Patricia spoke first. He's not prepared. He thinks he is, but he's not. His mother refilled her own glass with steady hands. But that doesn't mean you should walk away. Mother, be quiet, Adrian. I'm talking to Lena. Patricia turned her full attention to the younger woman. My son has spent 3 years hiding from anything that might hurt him. Work, his son, me. We're all safe because we're predictable. You're not predictable. You're complicated and messy and honest, and that terrifies him. I'm sitting right here, Adrian muttered. Yes, and you need to hear this. Patricia's expression softened slightly. Lena, I don't know you well enough to say whether you and Adrian belong together, but I know my son, and I know he needs someone who won't let him hide. Someone who'll call him out when he's being an idiot, push him when he's being a coward, and stand beside him when people like Vanessa show up to cause trouble. That's a lot to put on someone you just met, Lena said quietly. It is. And if you're smart, you'll walk away right now. Patricia smiled faintly. But you didn't walk away when he insulted you. You didn't walk away when he told you about his mother's interrogations. And you didn't walk away when Vanessa tried to embarrass you. So I don't think you're going to walk away now. Lena was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing the rim of her wine glass. Finally, she looked at Adrian. Your ex-fiancé is going to be a problem. I know. And people are going to ask questions about my past. I know. And your mother is terrifying. I'm aware. Good. Lena stood up, smoothing her dress. Then we're going into this with our eyes open. No illusions, no fairy tales, just two people trying to figure out if they can actually stand each other long enough to make this work. Adrian stood as well, hope and terror warring in his chest. So you're not walking away? Not yet, but I reserve the right to change my mind if you do something stupid again. That's fair. Patricia watched this exchange with an expression that might have been approval. Well, this has been an interesting evening. Margaret, bring out the dessert. And possibly more wine. We're going to need it. The rest of dinner passed in something resembling normalcy, though Adrian couldn't shake the feeling that Vanessa's interruption had shifted something fundamental. Patricia grilled Lena about her plans for returning to law, offering contacts and suggestions with the casual authority of someone who knew everyone worth knowing. Lena answered honestly, neither overstating her capabilities nor downplaying her ambitions. By the time they said goodnight and headed back to the car, it was nearly midnight. Your mother offered to introduce me to 3 senior partners at different firms, Lena said as they pulled away from the curb. Is she always that generous with strangers? Only when she likes them, which is rare. Adrian glanced at her. You impressed her. Or she's setting me up to fail spectacularly. That's also possible. They drove in silence for a few minutes before Lena said, Vanessa's going to cause trouble. You know that, right? Yeah, I know. She recognized my name immediately. That wasn't an accident. No, she probably looked you up the second she heard I was seeing someone. Adrian's hands tightened on the steering wheel. She does this, finds pressure points and pushes on them. Why does she care? She left you. Because it wasn't enough to leave. She wanted to win. The bitterness in his voice surprised even him. And me moving on, especially with someone she can paint as problematic, gives her a new game to play. Lena was quiet, processing this. What's she gonna do? I don't know, but whatever it is, it won't be subtle. Great. Looking forward to it. They pulled up to Lena's building, and Adrian walked her to the door despite her protest that she could manage alone. Thank you, he said as they stood in the dim lobby. For tonight. For not running when Vanessa showed up. For being honest with my mother. I didn't do it for you. I did it for me. But Lena's expression was softer than her words. Your mother was right, you know. You are terrified. I know. And you do try to manage everything like it's a business deal. I know that too. Good, as long as you know. She shifted her purse to her other shoulder. So what happens now? Now we figure out if this arrangement can become something real, if we can actually make this work beyond one dinner and shared trauma. Adrian surprised himself with his honesty. Or we decide it was a nice try and go our separate ways. Always giving yourself an exit strategy. It's what I do. Yeah, I'm starting to notice that. Lena pulled out her keys, then paused. For what it's worth, I don't think you're as broken as you think you are. Just hurt, and maybe a little lost. That's basically the same thing. No, it's not. Broken can't be fixed. Hurt heals and loss can find their way back. She touched his arm briefly. You just have to decide if you want to. She disappeared into her building before he could respond, leaving Adrian standing in the lobby with words caught in his throat and a feeling in his chest that might have been hope or might have been terror. Probably both. He drove home through empty Manhattan streets, replaying the evening in his head. His mother's interrogation, Lena's honesty, Vanessa's ambush, it all swirled together into a mess he couldn't quite sort through. When he got home, he found a text from his mother waiting. She's good for you. Don't screw it up. Mother. And one from Lena. Your mother offered me a job at one of her charities. Should I be worried? Adrian smiled despite himself. Very worried, but flattered. She only offers jobs to people she trusts. That's not reassuring. It's not meant to be. He was still smiling when another text came through. This one from an unknown number. He opened it, expecting spam, and felt his stomach drop. It was a photo. Lena leaving the courthouse 4 years ago, looking devastated, with a headline about the fraud investigation, and underneath a single message. Interesting girlfriend you've got there, Cole. I wonder what else she's hiding. A friend. Adrian stared at the message, cold fury building in his chest. He didn't need to guess who'd sent it. Vanessa's fingerprints were all over this. The question was what she planned to do with it, and whether Adrian and Lena's fragile arrangement could survive whatever came next. Adrian forwarded the anonymous text to his head of security without hesitation, then called Lena. She answered on the second ring, her voice thick with sleep. Adrian? It's almost 1 in the morning. I know, I'm sorry, but you need to see something. He sent her the screenshot. This came through about 10 minutes ago. The silence on the other end lasted long enough that Adrian wondered if the call had dropped. Then Lena said very quietly, "She's going to make this public again, isn't she?" "Probably, unless we get ahead of it first." "How do you get ahead of something that already destroyed you once?" The exhaustion in her voice made Adrian's chest ache. "I can't go through that again, Adrian. The articles, the whispers, everyone looking at me like I'm a criminal who got away with it." "Then we don't let her control the narrative." Adrian was already pacing his apartment, his mind shifting into the strategic mode that had built his company. "We tell your story first. The real one, with evidence, before she can twist it into something ugly. I have an NDA, remember? I can't discuss the specifics. NDAs have exceptions. Defamation is one of them. If Vanessa starts spreading lies about what happened, you have grounds to defend yourself." He paused. "And I have lawyers who can make that argument very convincingly." Lena was quiet again. "Why are you doing this?" "Because it's the right thing to do." "That's not an answer." Adrian stopped pacing, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. "Because someone should have stood up for you 4 years ago, and no one did. Because Vanessa doesn't get to destroy another person just to hurt me. And because—" He took a breath. "Because I'm starting to care about you, and that means protecting you when people come after you." The silence that followed felt different, heavier. "Adrian, we barely know each other." "I know, but that doesn't change the fact that I'm not going to let Vanessa use your past as a weapon." His voice was firm. "You don't have to fight this alone, Lena. Not anymore." He could hear her breathing on the other end, could imagine her sitting in her tiny apartment, weighing trust against self-preservation. "Okay," she said finally, "but we do this smart. No impulsive moves, no emotional reactions. If we're going to tell my story, we do it right." "Agreed. I'll have my legal team start pulling everything we can get on Daniel Mercer. Financial records, client complaints, anything that shows a pattern of fraud before your case. That'll take time." "We have time. Vanessa likes to play games. She won't move immediately. She'll wait until it causes maximum damage." Adrian sat down heavily on his couch. "Which means we need to be ready before she makes her move." They talked for another hour, planning strategy like they were preparing for war. Because in a way, they were. By the time they finally hung up, it was nearly 3 a.m., and Adrian felt wired despite the late hour. He spent the rest of the night combing through everything he could find on Daniel Mercer, looking for patterns, inconsistencies, anything that could support Lena's version of events. What he found made his blood boil. 3 associates had left Brennan and Cross under questionable circumstances in the 5 years before Lena's case. 2 had signed NDAs. 1 had simply disappeared from the legal world entirely. And Daniel Mercer's name appeared in the footnotes of all 3 departures, always as a mentor, never as the problem. By morning, Adrian had a file 2 inches thick and a headache that felt like someone was driving nails into his skull. "Dad?" Ethan appeared in the office doorway in his dinosaur pajamas, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Why are you still awake? It's morning." "I had work to do, buddy." Adrian closed his laptop before his son could see what he was looking at. "But you're right. I should get some sleep." "You look terrible. Like when you have the Singapore meetings." Ethan climbed onto the couch next to him, his small body warm and solid. "Is everything okay?" "Yeah, just grown-up stuff. Nothing for you to worry about." "Is it about Miss Lena?" Adrian looked at his son in surprise. "What makes you say that?" "Because you've been weird since dinner at Grandma's. And you were on the phone really late. I heard you." Ethan studied his face with unnerving perception. "Did something bad happen?" Adrian debated how much to share, then decided on honesty. Ethan deserved that much. "Someone's trying to make things difficult for Lena, bring up stuff from her past that wasn't her fault. I'm trying to help her deal with it. Like how kids at school try to make fun of me because my mom left." The comparison hit harder than Adrian expected. "Yeah, kind of like that." "That's mean." Ethan's expression was serious. "Are you going to fix it?" "I'm going to try." "Good. I like Miss Lena. She's nice, and she listens when people talk, which is rare." He paused. "Plus, she makes you smile." "You don't smile enough, Dad." Adrian pulled his son close, overwhelmed by the simple wisdom of a 7-year-old. When did you get so smart? I was born this way. You just don't pay attention. But Ethan was grinning, the gap in his teeth showing. Can we get pancakes for breakfast, the ones with chocolate chips? Sure, buddy, let me just... His phone buzzed, a text from his head of security. Trace the anonymous message. Sent from a burner phone purchased 3 days ago at a store in Midtown. Credit card used belongs to Marcus Chen's assistant. We'll keep digging. Adrian stared at the message, the pieces clicking into place. Vanessa wasn't just playing games, she was building a campaign, using Marcus's resources to stay one step removed from direct involvement. Dad? Pancakes? Right, yeah. Let me shower and change, then we'll go. Adrian sent a quick text to Lena. Got a lead on who sent the message. We'll explain later. How are you holding up? Her response came as he was heading to the bedroom. Angry, scared, determined, all at the same time. Thanks for asking. We'll figure this out. I promise. Don't make promises you can't keep, Adrian. Then I'll just have to keep this one. 3 days later, Adrian's legal team had assembled a case that would make any prosecutor jealous. Financial irregularities in Daniel Mercer's client accounts dating back 7 years. 3 former associates willing to break their ND, as if it meant stopping Mercer from hurting anyone else. And security footage from Brennan and Cross showing Mercer accessing Lena's computer after hours on multiple occasions. This is good, Patricia said, reviewing the files in Adrian's office. She'd insisted on being involved the moment she'd heard about Vanessa's threat. This is very good, but you realize going public with this will put Lena directly in the crossfire? She knows. We've discussed it. Adrian leaned back in his chair, exhaustion making his bones ache. She'd rather control the story than let Vanessa weaponize it. Smart woman. Patricia set down the file. Have you told her how you feel yet? What? Don't play stupid, Adrian. You're terrible at it. His mother's expression was knowing. You've spent 3 days barely sleeping, called in favors from half of Manhattan's legal community, and personally reviewed every piece of evidence twice. You don't do that for a business arrangement. I'm helping someone who deserves it. You're falling for her. Adrian opened his mouth to deny it, then stopped. Was he? The panic that had gripped him when he'd seen Vanessa's threat, the way his chest tightened every time Lena's voice wavered on the phone, the absolute certainty that he'd do whatever it took to protect her. That wasn't just friendship or obligation. Maybe, he admitted quietly, but it's too soon. We barely know each other. Your father and I knew each other 6 weeks before he proposed, 28 years of marriage before he died. Patricia's voice was softer than usual. Time doesn't matter as much as you think it does. What matters is whether you're brave enough to take the risk. And if it falls apart, if she realizes I'm not worth the trouble, then you'll survive. You survived Vanessa. You'll survive this. She stood up, smoothing her skirt. But you won't survive playing it safe forever, Adrian. Eventually, safe just becomes lonely. Before he could respond, his phone rang. Jessica's voice came through, tense and urgent. Sir, there's a situation. Vanessa Winters just posted something on social media about Lena. It's going viral. Adrian's stomach dropped. What did she post? Screenshots of the old articles about the fraud case, with commentary about how certain people use their past mistakes to manipulate wealthy men. Jessica paused. It's bad, sir. People are already picking it up. Send me the link and get our PR team on the phone. Now. Within minutes, Adrian was staring at Vanessa's post, a carefully crafted piece of character assassination dressed up as concerned commentary. She'd included the courthouse photo, several article headlines, and enough innuendo to plant doubt without making specific accusations. The comments were already brutal. Adrian called Lena immediately. I saw it, she said before he could speak. Her voice was flat, emotionless. I'm looking at it right now. We can fight this. We have the evidence. Adrian, there are already 300 comments. People are calling me a con artist, a gold digger, a criminal. He could hear the tremor underneath the calm. Your mother's charity offer is being framed as proof I'm manipulating your whole family. Then we release our evidence, show everyone what really happened, and drag 3 other women through their worst memories to clear my name? Make them relive their own betrayals? Lena's laugh was bitter. I can't do that, Adrian. I won't. So what? You just let Vanessa win? I let this die down. I go back to my life. And you go back to yours. Her voice cracked slightly. This was a mistake. I should have known better than to think I could just step into your world without consequences. Lena, don't. I'm sorry, Adrian. For what it's worth, I really was starting to believe this could work. The line went dead. Adrian stared at his phone, rage and helplessness warring in his chest. Then he looked at his mother, who was watching him with an expression that was equal parts sympathy and challenge. So what are you going to do? Patricia asked quietly. I don't know. Yes, you do. You're just scared to do it. She walked to the door, paused. Your father once told me that the measure of a man isn't in what he builds or how much money he makes. It's in who he stands beside when everyone else is running away. Think about that. After she left, Adrian sat in his office, staring at Vanessa's post and the hundreds of comments tearing Lena apart. Every instinct told him to protect himself, to let Lena walk away, to go back to his carefully controlled life where nothing unexpected could hurt him. Then he thought about Ethan asking why he didn't smile enough, about Lena's hand trembling as she held her wine glass at his mother's dinner, about the quiet strength in her voice when she'd told Patricia about her past, about the fact that she'd been betrayed before, and here he was, about to abandon her when she needed him most. Screw it, he muttered, grabbing his phone. He called his head of security first. I need you to arrange a press conference. Tomorrow morning, as early as possible. Full media presence. Sir, I don't think that's... I'm not asking for your opinion. Just make it happen. Next, he called his legal team. We're going public with the Mercer evidence, all of it. I want a full briefing packet ready by tonight, and I want those 3 women contacted. If they're willing to go on record, I'll cover their legal fees and any fallout. Mr. Cole, this could get messy. It's already messy. We're just making sure the truth comes out. Finally, he called Lena. She didn't answer. He tried again. Still nothing. So he did what any rational person would do. He drove to her apartment at 8 p.m. on a Wednesday night and buzzed her intercom until she answered. Adrian, go away. Not until you talk to me, face to face. I don't want to talk. Then just listen. Please, Lena. 5 minutes. A long pause, then the door buzzed open. Her apartment was exactly what he'd expected. Tiny, organized, with law books still lining one shelf despite the fact that she hadn't practiced in years. Lena stood in the center of her living room in sweatpants and an old Columbia law hoodie, her eyes red from crying. You shouldn't be here, she said. Probably not, but I needed to tell you something. Adrian stayed by the door, giving her space. I'm holding a press conference tomorrow morning. I'm releasing all the evidence we found on Daniel Mercer, and I'm telling them exactly what happened to you 4 years ago. Lena stared at him. You can't do that. I can, and I will, with or without your permission, because Vanessa doesn't get to destroy you just to hurt me, and Daniel Mercer doesn't get to keep ruining lives while everyone stays quiet. Adrian, the other women, all 3 agreed to go on record. They're tired of hiding too. He took a step closer. You're not alone in this, Lena. You never were. You were just convinced you had to handle it by yourself. Because every time I've trusted someone to help me, they've either abandoned me or betrayed me. Her voice broke. Why should you be different? Because I'm standing here instead of running away. Because I spent 3 days building a case instead of protecting my own reputation. Because... Adrian took a breath. Because somewhere in the past 2 weeks, this stopped being about my mother or social obligations or any of that. It became about you, about wanting to know you, to be around you, to prove that not everyone in your life is going to let you down. Lena wrapped her arms around herself. You barely know me. I know you're brilliant and brave and you've been hurt by people who should have protected you. I know you make terrible coffee, but perfect pancakes. I know you care more about my son's feelings than about my money. And I know that when you smile, really smile, not the professional one, it makes me want to be a better person. He moved closer. That's enough to know I'm not walking away. What if this doesn't work? What if we can't? Then we tried, and that's more than either of us has done in years. Adrian stopped a few feet away, close enough to touch, but not touching. I'm terrified, Lena, absolutely terrified. But I'm more afraid of spending the rest of my life wondering what we could have been if I'd just been brave enough to try. She looked at him for a long moment, tears streaming down her face. Then she closed the distance between them and kissed him, desperate and scared and full of everything they'd both been too afraid to say. When they finally broke apart, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. Is that a yes to the press conference? You're impossible. That's not a no. Fine, yes, but I'm standing beside you when you do it. This is my story. I should be the one to tell it. Are you sure? No, but I'm doing it anyway. She pulled back, wiping her eyes. When is this happening? Tomorrow, 9 a.m., the Carlisle Hotel. Adrian caught her hand. You don't have to do this, Lena. I can handle it. I know you can, but I need to do this for me, to prove I'm not ashamed anymore, that I'm not going to let what Daniel did define the rest of my life. The press conference the next morning was standing room only. Adrian had expected media attention, but not the wall of cameras and reporters that filled the hotel conference room. Lena sat beside him at the table, pale but composed, her hands folded in front of her. Patricia sat in the front row, her expression fierce and protective. And beside her, surprisingly, was Ethan, who'd insisted on being there to support Miss Lena. Adrian had tried to argue that a press conference wasn't appropriate for a 7-year-old, but his son had looked at him with those knowing eyes and said, You said people should stand beside each other when everyone else is running away. I'm not running away. So there he sat, too young to understand most of what was happening, but old enough to know it mattered. Adrian started with a prepared statement, laying out the evidence against Daniel Mercer in clear, unemotional terms, the financial irregularities, the pattern of blaming associates for his own crimes, the 3 women who were willing to testify to similar treatment. Then Lena spoke, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. 4 years ago, I was a young lawyer who trusted the wrong person. My mentor, Daniel Mercer, was running a fraud scheme that involved falsifying documents and stealing from clients. When the investigation started, he made it look like I was his accomplice instead of his victim. I took a settlement because I couldn't afford to fight, because I was scared and because I didn't think anyone would believe me over a senior partner with connections throughout the legal world. She paused, looking directly at the cameras. I've spent 4 years hiding from that choice, working in restaurants, pretending I never wanted to practice law, convincing myself that maybe I deserved what happened because I was too naive to see what was right in front of me. But I didn't deserve it. None of the women Daniel Mercer betrayed deserved it. And staying silent to protect a man who destroyed our careers isn't justice. It's cowardice. Lena pulled out a folder, setting it on the table. This contains evidence that Daniel Mercer has been running variations of the same scheme for at least 7 years. That he's targeted young associates, mostly women, and used them to cover his tracks. That Brennan and Cross, and later Hastings and Webb, ignored warning signs because it was easier than addressing the problem. The room erupted with questions, but Lena held up her hand. I'm filing a civil suit against Daniel Mercer and Hastings and Webb. I'm also requesting that the New York State Bar Association reopen the investigation into my case. And I'm here to tell anyone else who's been in my position, you don't have to stay quiet. You don't have to let fear win. Adrian watched her face as she spoke, saw the moment when shame transformed into strength, when hiding became standing tall. That's when the doors at the back of the conference room burst open. Daniel Mercer walked in with 2 lawyers flanking him, his expression thunderous. This is slander. Everything she's saying is a lie designed to salvage her failed career and manipulate a wealthy man into supporting her. Behind him, looking satisfied, was Vanessa. The room exploded into chaos. Cameras swiveled, reporters shouted questions, and security moved to intercept. But before anyone could stop him, Daniel Mercer strode toward the front table. You signed an NDA, Miss Hayes. Everything you've said here today violates that agreement. Actually, it doesn't. Adrian stood, placing himself between Daniel and Lena. NDAs become void when the other party engages in defamation or criminal activity. Your fraud scheme qualifies as both. You have no proof. We have security footage, financial records, and 3 witnesses willing to testify under oath. Adrian's voice was cold. We also have email correspondence between you and your assistant discussing how to handle Lena when she started asking questions about client accounts. Daniel's face went white. Those emails were privileged. They were evidence of a crime, which means attorney-client privilege doesn't apply. Adrian smiled, and it wasn't friendly. Did I mention my legal team includes 3 former prosecutors? They're very good at finding loopholes. Vanessa stepped forward, her expression still confident. This is ridiculous. You're trying to destroy Daniel's career because you can't accept that your new girlfriend is damaged goods. Careful, Vanessa. Patricia's voice cut through the noise like a blade. She stood slowly, and despite being half Vanessa's height, she commanded the room. You coordinated this attack with Marcus Chen's resources. We have the credit card records proving his assistant purchased the burner phone used to send threatening messages. That's conspiracy to commit defamation. Vanessa's smile faltered. You wanted to hurt my son by destroying Lena. Instead, you've left yourself open to civil and possibly criminal charges. Patricia's expression was glacial. I suggest you leave before I decide to pursue them. For the first time since Adrian had known her, Vanessa looked genuinely rattled. She grabbed Daniel's arm, and they retreated through the crowd, with their lawyers scrambling to follow. The room erupted again, but this time with a different energy. Reporters shouted questions about the lawsuits, about whether Hastings and Webb would face charges, about what this meant for other associates who might have been victimized. Adrian turned to Lena, who was gripping the edge of the table like it was the only thing keeping her upright. You okay? He asked quietly. Ask me in an hour. But she was almost smiling. Did that actually just happen? Yeah, it did. Ethan appeared at Adrian's elbow, his expression serious. Dad, that man was mean to Miss Lena. He was, buddy. Very mean. Are you going to make sure he can't be mean anymore? I'm going to try. Good. Ethan reached over and took Lena's hand with the unselfconscious affection of a child. You were really brave, Miss Lena. Like a superhero, but with words instead of powers. Lena looked down at him, and something in her expression crumpled. She squeezed his hand gently. Thank you, Ethan. That means a lot. Patricia appeared, already fielding calls on her phone. The Bar Association is opening an investigation. Hastings and Webb just issued a statement suspending Daniel pending review. And I've had calls from 3 different firms asking if Lena's looking for a position. She looked at Lena approvingly. You did well. Very well. I'm probably going to throw up later, Lena admitted. Perfectly normal. I'll have Margaret make you something calming. Patricia turned to Adrian. And you, I'm proud of you. For once, you didn't overthink yourself out of doing the right thing. Thanks, Mother. I think. The press conference wrapped up 20 minutes later with promises of follow-up statements and legal proceedings. Adrian guided Lena through the crowd and into a waiting car, Patricia and Ethan following close behind. Where are we going? Lena asked as they pulled away from the hotel. Somewhere quiet, where you can process everything without 100 cameras watching. Adrian glanced at his mother. Your place? Already arranged. Margaret's making lunch. Patricia was still on her phone, probably coordinating next steps with the efficiency of a military general. They spent the afternoon in Patricia's townhouse. Lena curled up on the couch with tea she didn't drink, Ethan showing her his dinosaur encyclopedia, Patricia fielding calls and occasionally issuing orders that made grown lawyers quake. Adrian sat beside Lena, close enough to touch, far enough to give her space. I can't believe we just did that, she said finally, her voice small. You did that. I just provided the platform. We did it together. She looked at him, her eyes still red but clearer than he'd seen them. I couldn't have done it alone, Adrian. I would have just kept hiding. You weren't hiding. You were surviving. Same thing sometimes. Ethan looked up from his book. Are you going to be a lawyer again, Miss Lena? I don't know, sweetheart. Maybe. If I can find a firm that will take a chance on me. You should start your own firm. Then you wouldn't have to wait for someone else to give you permission. He said it like it was obvious. Dad started his own company. You could too. Lena blinked. That's actually not a terrible idea. Ethan's full of good ideas, Adrian said. Most of them involve dinosaurs, but occasionally he branches out. The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal proceedings, media interviews, and slow, careful steps towards something that looked like a future. The Bar Association reinstated Lena's license with a formal apology. Daniel Mercer resigned from Hastings and Webb the day before they fired him, and Vanessa quietly deleted her social media accounts and left the city, presumably to cause trouble somewhere else. 3 of Manhattan's top law firms offered Lena positions. She turned them all down. Instead, she did what Ethan had suggested, started her own practice, focusing on representing associates who'd been mistreated by senior partners. Patricia provided the seed funding and connections. Adrian provided office space in one of his buildings. And Lena provided the expertise and determination that had made her a rising star before Daniel Mercer had tried to destroy her. 6 months after the press conference, on a cold Saturday morning in November, Adrian found himself back at the Italian bistro where this whole unlikely story had started. Lena sat across from him, coffee in hand, looking more relaxed than he'd ever seen her. Her practice was thriving. Her reputation was slowly rebuilding, and the shadows in her eyes had faded to something that looked like peace. "So," she said, smiling at him over the rim of her cup, "your mother wants to know when we're making this official." Official? Her words, "You've been dating for 6 months. Either commit or let the poor girl move on." Lena's smile widened. "She's subtle like a sledgehammer." "That's my mother." Adrian reached across the table, taking her hand. "What do you want?" "Honestly, I want to keep doing this, taking it slow, building something real instead of rushing into something that looks good on paper." She squeezed his fingers. "I want to keep having breakfast here on Saturdays, keep watching Ethan's science presentations, keep figuring out who we are together without pressure or expectations." "That sounds perfect. But I also want to know that this is going somewhere, that we're not just indefinitely dating without any plan for the future." Adrian pulled out a small box from his jacket pocket, setting it on the table between them. Lena stared at it like it might explode. "Adrian Cole, if that's an engagement ring, I'm going to kill you." "It's not." He opened the box to reveal a simple silver bracelet with a small charm in the shape of a key. "It's a promise that I'm not going anywhere, that this is going somewhere, and that when we're ready, both of us, no pressure, we'll figure out what comes next." Lena picked up the bracelet, her eyes shining. "A key? To my apartment, to my life, to whatever future we build together." Adrian felt his throat tighten. "You don't have to decide anything right now. Just know that I'm in this, Lena, completely." She slipped the bracelet onto her wrist, then stood up and kissed him in the middle of the bistro, not caring that Marco was watching with obvious approval or that other customers were smiling. When they finally broke apart, she said, "I love you. I don't know when it happened, but I do. And that terrifies me." "Yeah, me too." Adrian pulled her close. "Both the loving you part and the terrified part." "Good. We can be terrified together." They left the bistro hand in hand, walking through Manhattan streets that felt less intimidating with someone beside him. Adrian's phone buzzed with a text from Ethan, who was spending the morning with Patricia. "Did you give her the bracelet? Did she like it? Can we get pancakes to celebrate?" He showed it to Lena, who laughed. "Your son is the best wingman you could ask for." "Don't tell him that. His ego's already dangerous." They walked past the luxury stores and expensive restaurants that had once defined Adrian's world. Past the courthouse where Lena's career had nearly ended. Past all the places that had shaped them into who they were. Broken, scarred, but somehow still capable of building something new. 3 months later, on a Tuesday afternoon when Lena was in court defending another young associate who'd been scapegoated by a senior partner, Adrian got a call from his mother. "The Vanderbergs are having their annual gala next week. You should bring Lena." "Mother, I don't think it would be good for her practice. She needs to be seen succeeding, not just surviving, and you need to stop treating her like she's fragile." Patricia's tone softened slightly. "She's strong, Adrian. Let her show everyone just how strong." So the following Saturday, Adrian found himself back at the Plaza Ballroom where this whole disaster had started. But this time, Lena walked in beside him in a stunning navy dress, her head high, her hand steady in his. And this time, when people whispered and stared, it wasn't with pity or judgment. It was with respect for the woman who'd stood up to one of Manhattan's most powerful lawyers and won. Charlotte Vanderberg approached them almost immediately, her expression apologetic. "Lena, I wanted to apologize for that awkward dinner at Patricia's. I had no idea Vanessa would show up and cause such a scene." "It's fine, water under the bridge." Lena's smile was genuine. "How have you been?" They talked for a few minutes about nothing important, and Adrian realized he was watching Lena navigate his world with the same confidence she'd once brought to courtrooms. Not trying to fit in, not pretending to be someone she wasn't. Just being herself. Brilliant, sharp, unafraid. She's remarkable. Patricia appeared at his elbow, watching Lena charm a group of potential clients. I hope you realize what you have. I do. Good. Because if you screw this up, I'm taking her side. Adrian laughed. I wouldn't expect anything less. The evening passed in a blur of conversations and carefully orchestrated networking. Adrian introduced Lena to investors, lawyers, business owners, anyone who might need her services or could help spread word about her practice. She handled it all with grace, never overselling, never apologizing for her past, just letting her competence speak for itself. Around 10 p.m., they slipped out onto the same terrace where Vanessa had confronted Adrian months earlier. The air was cool, the city lights spread out before them like a promise. Thank you, Lena said, leaning against the railing, for bringing me here, for believing I could handle it. You don't need to thank me. You earned this. Maybe, but I wouldn't have had the courage to claim it without you. She turned to face him. You know what's funny? When I first met you, I thought you were just another entitled rich guy who thought money solved everything. I was. You were. But you're not anymore. Or maybe you are, and I just see past it now. She smiled. Either way, I'm glad I gave you a second chance. Best decision you ever made. Second best. She pulled him closer. The best was deciding to stop hiding, to fight for what I deserved instead of accepting what I was given. Adrian kissed her there on the terrace, with Manhattan spreading out beneath them and the future stretching out ahead like an open road. And for the first time in years, he felt something that wasn't fear or obligation or carefully managed expectations. He felt hope. 1 year later, Adrian and Lena stood in that same Italian bistro, the place where everything had started with an insult and a rejection, surrounded by the people who mattered most. Patricia in her elegant black dress, Ethan in a suit he'd insisted on choosing himself, Marco beaming from behind the counter. I can't believe you're actually doing this here, Lena said, looking around at the checkered tablecloths and mismatched chairs. Your mother must be having a stroke. My mother suggested it, actually. Adrian straightened his tie for the 15th time. She said the best marriages start in places that feel like home, not places that look good in photographs. When did Patricia Cole become a romantic? Approximately 10 minutes after she met you. The ceremony was simple. A judge who'd worked with Lena on one of her cases, a handful of friends, and vows they'd written themselves. No elaborate flowers, no designer dress, no pretense. Just two people who'd found each other in the wreckage of their own lives and decided to build something better. I promise to call you out when you're being an entitled jerk, Lena said, her eyes shining, to push you when you're being a coward, and to stand beside you when everyone else is running away. I promise to believe in you even when you don't believe in yourself, Adrian replied, to protect you without trying to control you, and to make sure you never feel invisible again. Ethan, serving as ring bearer, handed over the bands with exaggerated solemnity. Dad, don't mess this up. She's the best thing that ever happened to us. I know, buddy. I know. They kissed to applause from their small crowd, and Marco immediately started pouring champagne and bringing out food that was definitely not on any menu. Later, as they sat at the same booth where Adrian had made his terrible offer and Lena had shut him down, Patricia raised her glass. To my son, who finally learned that some things can't be bought, and to Lena, who taught him that the best things in life usually start with someone telling you no. To saying no, Lena agreed, clinking her glass against Patricia's, and to the stubborn idiots who come back anyway. Adrian pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her perfume and the coffee that always lingered in this place. Thank you for giving me a second chance. Thank you for earning it. She kissed him softly. Now feed me. I'm starving. And Marco made carbonara. They ate and laughed and celebrated into the night, this unlikely family built from broken pieces and second chances. And when they finally left the bistro, walking out into the Manhattan night as husband and wife, Adrian looked back one more time at the place where his life had changed. A waitress stood behind the counter, wiping down tables and probably dreaming of something bigger. Adrian caught her eye and smiled, hoping she knew that sometimes the worst moments lead to the best ones. That rejection can become redirection, that endings are just beginnings in disguise, and that the person who calls you out on your worst behavior might just become the person who brings out your best. Lena squeezed his hand, pulling him forward into their future. And Adrian went willingly, no longer afraid of what he might lose, finally ready to embrace what he'd found. Not a perfect life, not a fairy tale, just something real, messy, and absolutely worth fighting for.